All right. All right. Are we alive? Ladies and gentlemen, it does look like we have just gone live. Welcome back to each and every one of you. It is, of course, Thursday, and it is 12 o'clock Thursday afternoon. It's the day before Good Friday. I'm sure that a lot of you are finishing your week and you're probably going away for the weekend if you can afford it in the current economy. For a lot of you, this just became a very expensive weekend thanks to the fuel increases. And of course, the ANC wants all of you to know that they did a good thing. They relaxed some of the money that they were already stealing from the public by lessening some of their fuel levies, which was already exorbitant and just way too much. But they, of course, do want you to praise them for the fact that they lifted their foot off your neck just enough that you can't really be angry at them, which is always just mega frustrating to me. The way in which things work here in this country. Before we get going, I want to give a massive shout out to Angela Drury. Angela, for the $9 donation over on Stub. I truly appreciate that. It is the financial just incentives and the financial gifts that you guys give that allow this channel to continue growing and hopefully continue growing. And hopefully I can continue to bring even more news and information to all of you. I'm incredibly honored to know that a lot of what I do actually reaches outside of South Africa. You know, being contacted by viewers from America, by viewers from Europe, finding out about the stuff that is happening in South Africa, because there's not much else that we can do, right? The only thing that I can do, the only thing that content creators like myself can do is inform you guys of what is going on, because let's be real, the media isn't going to do that. So inform you guys, but then also hopefully bring to attention to the rest of the world what is actually happening here and what are we dealing with. And then sometimes just to blow off a little steam, because let's be real, it can get a little annoying at times to deal with what is undoubtedly just one of the worst periods in the history of South Africa. And yes, I include that alongside apartheid. And the reason I included alongside apartheid was bad, and everyone knew that it was bad, right? Like there was no one in the world, at least no one serious in the world, that was looking at apartheid and thinking, wow, what a cool system. You know, we should really try and do that. The whole world looked at that system and said, dudes, come on. You can't keep doing this. The problem is that the system we're in now sort of has a rubber stamp. And if it wasn't for President Trump coming to power in 2024, we would have still lived in a world where the world rewards the ANC for the evil that they visit upon ordinary South Africans. And that's sort of where we're going to start the first discussion for today. I really want to show you guys this because, well, I think it's important, and it's something that we have to talk about, just the immense amount of evil that this government, this ANC, is doing to the people of South Africa. But then also, and this is going to be nice for those of you who don't yet understand how to gauge where the ANC is at any given point in their political career. It usually goes something like this. When all things are going well, the ANC puts up parties, they put up drives, they give out t-shirts, give out KFC, all of the usual stuff. And they praise themselves for all of the things that they didn't do, but that they can take responsibility for without anyone of note really complaining. But then, and this is sort of indicative now for the last 15 or so years, ever since 2007, really, where things started to go horribly wrong, we started seeing this trend where whenever the ANC starts to struggle a little bit, right, when stuff isn't quite going the way that the ANC was hoping it would go, they immediately jump onto a two-part strategy. The first strategy is to consistently remind the South African public that they are the organization of the people. So they are the servants of the people, they work for the people, And it is thanks to the ANC that the people of South Africa now have freedom and apparently prosperity and apparently a whole host of other things. I actually shared this on my feed over the weekend, where President Cyril Ramaphosa just said a whole bunch of nonsense things that is truly unbelievable when you actually listen to the things that he said here. Okay, so just listen to this. I'm not going to play this for you. I won't subject all of you to this man's nonsense. But just listen to what Ramaphosa said here. He says, we, the government, help to de-risk the country, making South Africa more and more investable. Those are words that the president said. The largest risk to South Africa's economy, to businesses being opened in South Africa's economy, is the government. I mean, it's not as if, yes, South Africa is an incredibly violent country, but most businesses aren't constantly being shut down and being regulated by ordinary citizens. Most of the businesses in South Africa struggle because of a failure of government, right? Because the government failed to build any new power stations, even though they were warned in 1998 that we are going to run out of electricity. By 2008, when load shedding finally happens, the ANC is all Pikachu face. They're like, huh? What do you mean we don't have electricity? And then, of course, it would take another 6 years before they even begin to decide, oh, we should probably build some power stations. And then finally, it would take another, almost 10 years for those power stations to come up and running, but they're not really working even now. So, it is what it is, sort of thing. That's the ANC. So thanks to that, we have some of the highest energy prices in the world, definitely some of the highest in Africa. And as a result of that, most businesses are now saying they're going to have to close down. There's nothing else that they can actually do here. When we look at fuel pricing, in South Africa, it's something like 6 or almost 7 rand of our fuel is levies. Let that sink in, guys. We're not talking about the taxes and the hidden stuff that's also on top of that, because if you actually include all of that, it's about half of our fuel price isn't for fuel. It's for the government to take. The government just takes that money and they go do stuff with that money. But of the levies, now I should just stop and pause for 2 seconds and just go, it is illegal in South Africa to be taxed twice on the same amount of income, right? So if I get my salary and you've already taxed me, our tax law says that you can't tax me again on my salary. This would mean, and I want to paint this picture because I have a very strong hatred for taxes in the first place. But this would mean that because I get a salary, I pay personal income tax. That means that all of the money in my bank has already been taxed. This means that if I go to Checkers and I buy a loaf of bread and I pay taxes on that loaf of bread, right? I pay VAT and all sorts of other taxes. Well, bread is actually VAT exempt. So let's use another example. I buy croissants, right? And I pay taxes on that. I am being taxed twice on my income because I've already paid income tax, right? The government has already taken its share. Now I'm paying again taxes on that. But I'm not only just paying taxes on that, I'm also paying taxes on all of the taxes that's been applied up until that point to get the croissant actually in the little package, including the plastic tax and the carbon tax and all of the other taxes that go alongside that. And then fuel to get to the shop to actually buy the croissants. Yes, I've just been taxed on that as well. And then I pay a bunch of levies that's supposed to come from my taxes, but because the government needs to steal that taxes, they need to ask levies so that I can pay for the stuff that the taxes should have paid for. But now they can also steal the levy money, right? And so I'm being taxed now twice on the income that I'm already being taxed on. Let's say you're actually, you're a do-gooder and you go, okay, well, I'm going to save some of my money. I'm going to invest it. I'm going to put it somewhere safe. Well, guess what? When you want that money back, the government can tax you again. You've already paid taxes on that money, just FYI, but now you want the money back. Well, the money is worth more than when it went in. And so the government says, well, actually, we're going to tax this as well because there's been capital gains. Please understand, the capital gains that happened was with money that I worked for, that I already paid taxes on, that I then invest in another company that pays taxes every single month on every single sale that they make, as well as on the profits that they make and the profits that they are now giving to me in the form of dividends and all the rest of it. But I have to pay capital gains tax on income that has already been taxed, on my income that I invested that has already been taxed. Now I'm being taxed even further, just so that the government can make even more money from the people. This is the stuff that we have to deal with as ordinary citizens, not even talking about the government and their very risky business environment, where 30% of your company, when your company gets large enough, has to go to some black cadre that has never done a job in his entire life, except for the fact that he happens to own a yellow t-shirt that says ANC on it, and that somehow qualifies this black guy to sit on the board of Microsoft, on the board of Amazon, on the board of whatever. And because Starlink will not sell 30% of their company to the black cadres, they're not allowed to operate in this country. But of course, they pretend as if it's because of national security risks. Never mind the fact that they want to give that exact same contract to the Chinese. I mean, if I'm going to make a choice between Starlink, a private company providing internet to ordinary South Africans, and the Chinese government providing internet, because all companies in China is the Chinese government, I'm going to go with the private company, which I can actually just trust that they might use my data, and maybe they'll give my data to some call center. I'm already getting about 50 calls a day from call centers, so who even cares about that? But at least I know that it's not going to the Communist Party that's going to be using it for all sorts of nefarious reasons, right? But fundamentally, that's sort of the country where we live in. The government is now pretending like they're the ones de-risking the country from who? From you. You're the risk, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. So what the hell are you even talking about? There was another nonsense thing. Just listen to this. Our economy is dynamic. It's enterprising. Finally. He meant finally, right? So finely calibrated. But he doesn't know how to spell finally, so he said finally calibrated for growth and powered by innovation. Now, I want you guys to understand, he's not wrong. Our economy is dynamic. It is enterprising. It's not finely calibrated, but I guess it's somewhat calibrated to growth is an overstatement. So let's leave that out. Let's just say that he was probably wrong about. But he also spelled it wrong, so it doesn't even count. And it's powered by innovation. Again, absolutely true. If you want to be a businessman in South Africa, there are a couple of things that you're going to have to know. So any one of you watching this that's thinking, hey, I live in America, I do great business here, I really want to challenge. Well, the South African shores are a beckoning, my friend. If challenge is what you want, challenge is what you will have here. So you will have to be dynamic and enterprising, because you'll have to figure out all manner of interesting ways to deal with all of the roadblocks that the government puts in front of you. And trust me, there will be many of them. We have an insane labor law in this country, to the point where it is impossible to fire someone once you've hired them, even if they steal from your company. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to go through. If you want to open a business, if you want to grow a business, there's a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through, and a bunch of palms that you have to grease. And you have to find very dynamic and enterprising ways of greasing those palms and not getting caught. Because if one cater finds out that you paid this guy $1 million, but you didn't pay him, he might just take you to court, right? And then you're going to have to be dynamic and enterprising to deal with that court case as well. Because the justice system is also, let's just say, finely calibrated by the ANC to do all manner of things. So we are driven by innovation, and you will have to innovate in order to deal with all of the obstacles that the ANC puts in front of you. So again, our president doing an amazing job of selling this country, but you have to sort of run it through the Ramaphosa filter first so that you understand what he's talking about. None of these things would be necessary if this government wasn't as bad, but it also means that we're pretty good, right? Our businessmen are some of the best in the world because, they're constantly working not just to get customers, but also to get the government off their backs. Anyways, let's get back to what Thabo Mbeki said here, because that's actually what I want to talk about. Okay, so Thabo Mbeki, he's been doing the rounds the last few days, just going about first warning in this exact same sort of show. He warns that should the ANC crumble, South Africa will become ungovernable. A little threat there for all of you. He basically says that if we don't continue to support the ANC will tear this country apart. So you can vote for the ANC and watch them drive the economy into the ground, or you cannot vote for the ANC and watch them burn the economy to the ground. Choices. It's always nice when you have options, right? No one can say that we lack for choice in our country, but he says the following. The most fundamental principle all members of the ANC is to understand that the ANC exists to serve the people. That's a principle that he lays down. And if all leaders and members of the ANC are not driven by that consciousness that the ANC is a servant of the people. So he is saying it is the principled position of the ANC that they are indeed a servant of ordinary South Africans. I would argue that that is not the ANC principle, because a principle is a guiding philosophy, right? If I'm going to say that my principle is to be honest, and then all I do on this channel is lie, then my principle is to lie. The principle to be honest is a dream, right? I hope to one day be honest, but right now I'm lying a lot, right? And so that's the principle. Principle is what you do, what you're known for. The ANC isn't known as the servant of the people. At least I don't feel like they are, but maybe I'm just wrong. So Fikile Mbalula celebrated his birthday yesterday. It is kind of fitting because Fikile Mbalula is a clown and he happens to have been born on April Fools. So there is a sense of humor in the universe, ladies and gentlemen. It knows. And it knew when Fikile Mbalula was born, it knew this guy's going to be a clown. We have to give him the right date for him to actually do his clown things. But this video is actually something that it will make you puke when you watch it. I watched it, and that's 4 minutes and 42 seconds that I will never actually get back. So I will not subject any of you to it. But it is effectively a greatest hits from Fikile Mbalula, where he says the following in this. Today, as I celebrate my birthday, I reflect on a journey well traversed, one filled with happiness. He is very happy. He's made a lot of money out of the South African people. Loved ones, and a dedication to the service of our nation. Again, remember what I told you. This is how you know the ANC is in trouble. The amount of times that they hammer home, we are the servants of the people. We are the ones that saved you. We are the ones that help you. And this is now just constantly. Paul Mashatile made a number of posts claiming the exact same stuff. Thabo Mbeki is doing this. Cyril Ramaphosa is doing this. Fikile Mbalula is now doing this. The party, of course. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. You remember the infamous Polokwane Congress, where Jacob Zuma defeated Thabo Mbeki and became the president of South Africa. At the time, I lived in Polokwane. At the time, I was working as a manager at a bottle store or a liquor store, for those of you that is watching from foreign waters. And our liquor store was the one closest to the event. So we were very busy that day. In fact, our sales for that day was, I won't give away the exact figures, but let's just say for that one single day, we broke far above a few million for that one day. The sales were astronomical. And the reason for it is every single ANC caterer that walked into that bottle store, they weren't buying beer, right? These guys weren't buying Black Label. They weren't buying Lion at the time was still a thing. They weren't buying Castle. They were buying Johnny Walker Blue. They were buying Johnny Walker Black. They were buying Regal. They were spending top of the line money on their alcohol, and they kept coming back. They just kept coming back. It was absolutely insane to see the amount of money that these guys were dropping on booze. Just literally every guy that came to my counter that day, because literally we had 4 counters. All 4 of them had to be manned because it was just lines as these guys were waiting to get their alcohol. Every single guy that I helped, well over 10,000 Rand on booze, just dropped well over 10,000. Are these the people that are in service to the ordinary South Africans? When's the last time any of you in chat walked into a bottle store and dropped 10,000 Rand? I haven't. I've never done that. I mean, the most money I ever dropped on alcohol was when me and my friends right after high school decided to go to the little nature reserve just outside Polokwane, and we bought 24 cases of Castle Lager, and we got absolutely hammered. This was back when I was still drinking at the nature reserve. We slept there. It was great fun. I think that entire thing cost us maybe something like $1,500, and it was a bunch of us. It was like 12 of us that bought this. So who the hell has that kind of money? But these are apparently the servants of our nation. These are the people that manages to serve their people. I guarantee you, his party probably cost 2, 3, 4, 500,000 Rand. Easy. I spoke to a guy yesterday who actually works at a car dealership. And he told me the story not that long ago. We're talking a few weeks ago. A guy walks into the car dealership. I won't say which car dealership, but it's one of the nice ones. The guy walks in and he goes, I just got the tender for something. I won't say any names, but he just got a tender and now he wants to buy a new car. Cash. In his bank account, there's well upwards of 3 million just sitting there. But guess what? The guy who just got the tender, and this specific tender, he would have had to have some technical knowledge, like how to work with computers and stuff. It would have been a requirement for this specific tender. He didn't even know how to log into his mobile app. The guy at the dealership had to help him to log into his mobile app because he just bought the phone as well. And just so that you guys know, right? Just so that you guys know. It's that kind of country that we're dealing with. These are apparently the servants of our nation, right? These are guys that's really going above and beyond to help us. But then you realize these servants of our nation, right? Remember when I spoke about the taxes? That was pre-planned. I knew that we were going to get onto this story. It's almost like I plan my live streams. I promise. It's an accident. Enoch Godengwana is celebrating. I want you guys to understand this. They're celebrating SARS at the moment. Why are they celebrating SARS? Because SARS just managed to break 2 trillion Rand that they stole from the South African public. 2 trillion. Their reason for why they think this is an amazing, amazing thing? Compliance. Even the language makes me want to puke. This is thanks to stronger compliance. The South African public is being bled dry by these parasites, which, by the way, every single department of the South African government is falling apart. You can go to Home Affairs, even in the Western Cape, and what you're met with at Home Affairs is a department where as soon as you reach the front of the aisle, right, you're in the queue. And I promise you guys, this is exactly my experience at Home Affairs. You're in the queue. The queue that you're in is in order to pay for your passport, right? You're in the queue for your passport. You're going to go pay. You see the lady in front of you. People are paying at that lady. Then you, right, 4 or 5 customers later, you get to the lady that people were just paying her. And then you go, I would like to pay for my passport. And the lady gets a look on her face. And the look on her face is as if No one has ever uttered those words to her in her entire life. This is the first time anyone in her entire career has told her they want to pay for their passport. And now you're standing there because this lady is now figuring out how does one pay for a passport? And the system is glitching, and the system is slow, and then the system is offline, so you can't pay for your passport now, meaning you can't get it yet, you have to come back tomorrow. That's sort of the bog standard approach at Home Affairs, right? When you go to the traffic department, same thing. There's always something down, or something isn't working, or something is wrong. It's always something, except SARS. The South African Revenue Service runs like a world-first German train. There is nothing they miss. There is no stone left unturned. These guys have the ability to get into your bank account. And of course, it's being celebrated because they are now the most technologically advanced government department in South Africa. And they will soon have the ability to employ AI against the citizens. So soon, you won't need an individual SARS agent to sit there and figure out if someone isn't paying their taxes. AI will just go through everyone's bank accounts and figure out who is and isn't paying their taxes. So soon, even the people that are trying to skim off the top will no longer be able to. And guess what? SARS doesn't need your permission to just go and take the money out of your account. They can just do that. But we're supposed to celebrate. We're supposed to celebrate that SARS has just stolen 2.1 or 2.01 trillion rand from the South African public. These are, ladies and gentlemen, your servants. These are your servants. How do you guys feel knowing that your servants are rich beyond belief? Beyond belief. These guys are making money hand over fist. This government is bleeding its already shrinking tax base into oblivion. Make no mistake, the tax base continues to worsen. Fewer and fewer, every single year, there are fewer and fewer people paying more and more taxes. And every single year, like clockwork, we find out that the tax base is now smaller than it was last year, but somehow SARS is collecting even more money than what it did last year. But the ANC wants you to give them a round of applause because fuel could have gone up by almost 5 rand, but thanks to them just sort of taking their boot off your throat. Just enough, not completely. Look, if you have a fetish for being choked, the ANC is really your government. But for all of us normal folk who really don't find that all that enjoyable, it is hell. It is hell. Because the ANC literally just lifted their foot a little, just so that you can sort of just to go, and now praise me, please. Because I'm not stealing all of your money. I'm stealing at least 3 rand less. And all of us are supposed to go, man, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much, President Ramaphosa, for your incredible work here in this country, which is insane because we have known for about a month now that the fuel will be increasing, that we will see massive fuel increases. And the president announced, 2 days before the increase that he's taking it seriously. He has just told Minister Godongwana that we need a task team. We need a task force to figure out what's happening with this fuel pricing thing. It's like, my dude, why are you guys always the last to know? I genuinely, it must be hell being an ANC member. I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe everyone in the country just decided to not show them what's actually happening in the country until the last minute. But genuinely, every single time something happens, the citizens are already speaking about it, already saying, well, that's going to be really bad for all of us. And then like a day before, it's as if the ANC goes, wait, what? There's a war in Iran? What do you mean there's a war in Iran? What do you mean that's probably going to affect our fuel prices? This is amazing. Who knew, right? And then suddenly there's task forces and everything that has to be. This is what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. And I needed to get this off my chest because I'm genuinely getting to a point where I can no longer be quiet. At some point, we have to start saying this is an illegitimate government. This is a government that does not even adhere to the most basic functions of what a government should do. Uphold the law, keep the citizens safe, make sure that human rights are being observed. None of these things are things that the government does. This means that this is an illegitimate government. This government, there's no reason why we should respect a government that can't even do the basics of what a government is required to do, not even well at all. Just, oh man. So annoying, so annoying. Anyways, now that I'm done sort of ranting and raving, I have another story that I'm going to go through, but as is customary, I'll quickly see what you guys have to say. No surprise, I use stories like that. I have legit home office and SARS refused to acknowledge it. Yeah, because you can't get money back, of course. Taxpayers must get themselves educated on taxes. There are many ways to reduce taxes. If more people do this, SARS will get less. Anita, the problem is that most people don't have the money to pay the accountants to actually figure out how do I reduce my tax bill, right? And so a lot of people end up just paying because they really don't want to get in trouble. Because let's be real, this government's really good when you steal money at making sure that justice is done. So AI must sort out all this crazy corruption and stealing. No, Faith. No. What do you mean? The ANC would never turn the AI on themselves. Like, no, that's just for plebs like you and me. For the ANC, they've decided to put the slowest kid in the class on the corruption task team. That's why they had to stop the Scorpions and introduce the Hawks. The Scorpions were too intelligent. So they went around the police force of South Africa. They looked at every single police officer that really couldn't be a police officer and said, you're going to be a hawk now. Come take care of corruption for us. Basically, everything that can be taken from you for things you don't get is kept top notch, while any service that have to give back to the people who elected them is left to ruin. Well, yes, because what else is there, right? At the end of the day, the ANC has a mandate to keep the people of South Africa poor. Because every single time, so it plays into the hands of communists. The idea is, and this is the thing that the ANC continuously fails on, because the idea from a communist perspective is you create crises, and then through the crises, you take power. So every single time, the European Union does this amazingly well. Like, the European Union does this incredibly well. Every single time there's a crisis in the world, the European Union uses that crisis in order to gain even more power for itself. Now, the ANC wants to do something sort of similar to that. The problem is just that their crises are not managed. And so what ends up happening is the crisis spirals out of control, and it ends up forcing them to relent a lot of their power to the free market, like, for example, electricity. The electricity crisis should have been used for the government to gain even more power and spend even more money. But the problem is it got so bad that ultimately they realized that there will not be a country left if they continue to hold on to it. And so eventually they had to let it go. The same is true with Steenhuisen, right? The foot-and-mouth disease, he was hard up on the government will solve this problem, and only the government. No farmers may get involved. This is the government solution, and the government will solve all of your problems. And then when the problem reached the point where the ANC finally realized, well, we can't solve this problem, not without being tied in court and ultimately being forced to stop excluding the private sector. Now they come out and Steenhuisen goes, guys, look at us working with the private sector. Look at me, right? I am your minister. I am the capitalist guy, really. You know, now he's pretending like it was his idea all along. That's sort of the problem with government. Can you do an in-depth story on Siener van Rensburg versus what's happening in South Africa? James, I already did one video on Siener van Rensburg, and I am currently reading through Siener van Rensburg's visions. So I'm trying not to read books about it, but I'm reading through all of his visions to try and analyze all of his visions and figure out which ones work currently in South Africa and which ones don't. I know there are books where people wrote it, but then you may as well just read the book yourself, right? I'm not going to tell you what another author said about his visions. I want to do that for myself because, as I told you guys before, I don't know if Sinner's visions are true. I don't know if what Sinner saw is in fact real. So I want to do it for myself because if I'm doing it, I know that I can trust my interpretation. I don't know what other people might or might not want to do. So I am working through it, but it is slow because I'm currently reading a bunch of different books, right? One book that's currently gripped me a little, so I'm not even doing anything at the moment other than that, is a book called Why Africa is Poor. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's genuinely a good book. As soon as I'm done with that book, I'll probably do an analysis of it just to give you guys a bit of insight, because this guy actually shows you how foreign aid, has made Africa poorer, right? He gives you a lot of like evidence to show you how Africa ended up the way that it is. But I'm working through that, and I promise I will go even deeper onto Sinner van Rensburg in the near future. I just need to find time for all of this so that I can actually do it. But yeah, fundamentally, it's so frustrating. It is just so frustrating. Then let's quickly talk, ladies and gentlemen. A question that I've been getting quite a lot in the last few weeks, well, actually few months, has been from a number of you that want to know, when is President Trump going to act against the ANC? How much longer is the ANC going to spit in America's face before President Trump actually acts? And I think for a lot of us, we are at a point where it is patriotism that makes me want to see the ANC lose. And this is something that I want people to understand. It is not me being a traitor. It is because I love this country that I know the ANC has to lose. There is no other option. As long as the ANC stands, this country will always lose. Because you can just look at the history of what the ANC has done to this country, and you can look at the economic reality of this country now, 32 years after the fall of apartheid, to realize that the problem in this country is the ANC. So when exactly is President Trump going to act against the ANC and against South Africa? Well, there's a couple of things that we need to understand. South Africa is not an enemy of the United States. As much as the ANC would like to pretend like they're super important and they stick it to the Americans, South Africa is not an enemy of the United States. The ANC has ensured that South Africa is so insignificant to the United States that we aren't really capable of being... It would be like me calling a 4-year-old toddler my enemy. A 4-year-old toddler could be an annoyance, but an enemy, not so much, right? An enemy must have the ability to at least do something to you. And so South Africa doesn't really have that position. Where South Africa's significance comes from is twofold. Number one is our geolocation, right? So the location on the geopolitical landscape that we inherited, where we are located. We basically, if you can control Simonstown, if you can control South Africa, you can effectively cut off any ships from crossing around towards America. And that's important. That's why America fought for Greenland. That's why Trump wanted assurances from the Europeans that America will have indefinite say on the future of Greenland, because it stops any enemy wanting to attack from the sort of northern Arctic into America. They can stop them there. South Africa is good for the southern part of it, right? Because if you have South Africa, any ship that wants to go around Africa, you can stop them. You can quickly respond to a problem there. So that's the first part of it. It's not the most important thing, but it is important enough. And then the big one is China. You see, South Africa is currently being used by China as a springboard into Africa. And America wants Africa, but really what America wants is China not to have Africa. So that's really the only position that South Africa occupies in the mind of the Americans. So from President Trump's perspective, where does South Africa lie in terms of priorities? China is number one. That's the top priority for President Trump, hurting China. And you can look at every single move that President Trump has made, and you will find that every single one of those moves are connected to China. Not Russia. The Europeans love to pretend like Russia is the big problem. The fact that President Trump relaxed sanctions on Russia sort of tells me everything I need to know about what President Trump thinks about when he thinks about Russia. Russia is Europe's problem. And I actually think that there might be an argument to be made that President Trump is going to sell out the Europeans because the Europeans abandoned America. But we'll talk about that in a second. Fundamentally, what President Trump, the fact that he relaxed it on Russia tells you America does not consider Russia a big problem. It's China. Taking Venezuela's Maduro off the map and getting Venezuela to partner with America. Basically, all oil now goes to America. America refines it and then sells it. So everyone makes money. That really hurt China. This whole Iran thing, it's really hurting China because China now, for the first time in decades, has to buy oil at market price. The Chinese economy was never built to buy oil at market price. So this is hurting the Chinese. Yes, the American citizens are paying higher fuel prices. Yes, the citizens of the world are paying higher oil prices in general. But China is the one that really gets hurt because every other country in the world runs on the idea that we pay market value for our oil. You know, we buy oil from the rest of the world and we have to pay market price for that. China is the only one that managed to find all of the terrorist nations in the world, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, well, not Cuba because they don't have oil, but Iran and Venezuela, and make deals with them because no one else can buy their oil. China will buy their oil for pennies on the dollar. So China's economy, in large part, was subsidized by American sanctions. Now that's off the table. China can no longer buy cheap oil. South Africa is going to become important once Cuba has been taken care of because America has to solidify their backyard and basically stop any interference from China and Russia into the South Americas. Then South Africa will become a significant counterpoint for the Americans. Because once that happens, South Africa is the final ally of China left outside of the nuclear power that is Russia. The thing that worries me, and I'm going to give you guys two scenarios. One is not necessarily as worrying. The other one is very worrying. In the first scenario, President Trump says and continues to say that he doesn't want to punish the people of South Africa, but he does want to punish the ANC. As a result of this, literally just earlier today, I read on the United States, it's the United States Foreign Affairs, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, or the House Committee for Foreign Affairs, just today announced that senior officials of Rwanda has been placed under sanction. Desiree, thank you so much for joining the membership program. Truly appreciate you. Thank you. And so massive sanctions on those senior officials. Those senior officials will now find it impossible to travel abroad because they will most likely see or they will most likely see warrants being issued against them, which means no other country is going to touch them because then they're going to get into America's bad book, and they don't want that to happen. There's going to be financial sanctions, meaning all of their bank accounts are being frozen almost immediately, which suddenly makes it a lot harder. And this President Trump or the Trump administration is doing because these Rwandan officials were causing chaos in the Democratic Republic of Congo, just sort of stoking and fueling the fires in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the Americans have had enough of this. And so this punishment is now coming their way. That is the first option. This will almost definitely hurt the ANC because almost every bank in South Africa is tied to the American system. Our banks own a lot of American debt, a lot of American bonds. Our banks own a lot of American dollars. And so as a result of that, if the Americans were to start putting a lot of pressure on the South African banks, the South African banking system is completely integrated. It is not like the Russian system where it's isolated or insulated against foreign events. Our banking system is open. It's one of the reasons why the banking sector of South Africa is one of the most advanced banking sectors in the world. From day one, the banking sector looked to the world and sort of said, we will become the banking sector of the world. That also means that there is a severe vulnerability in our banks. They are susceptible to pressure from the United States, because if the United States were to cut them off, a lot of them would find it very, very difficult to continue operating. And so that could definitely happen. But more importantly, it's the accounts that these guys have internationally. And I guarantee you, every single one of these ANC cadres have millions of dollars in other countries. Right. So that is certainly a thing that can happen. That's scenario number one. It's a scenario that will have effects on South Africans, but these will be secondary effects. The ANC has already shown themselves to be getting a lot more desperate in how they act. Let me quickly see if I can find that information for you guys. I have it somewhere here. Oh, yeah, I remember now. So the ANC, well, actually the MK, but I guarantee you the ANC is a part of this as well. But this has just sort of come down the pike. The MK wants to challenge the Constitution in Parliament. This will pass, just so that all of you know. It has to do with section, I believe it's 235. Section 235 allows explicitly for the right to self-determination for ordinary South Africans. The MK argues that it does not allow for that, and it causes confusion. Because effectively what they're saying is cities or towns like Urania is illegal. And what they quote is ultimately that these towns somehow hurt black people. Not entirely sure how a whites-only Afrikaner town hurts black people. No black people live there. No black people are allowed to live there. So who are you hurting exactly? Like, sure, no black people can live there, but if you're black, would you really want to live there? Why would you want to live in a place where they don't want you to live? Right? So that argument just doesn't make sense at all. Tracy, thank you so much for the 100 Rand donation. I truly appreciate you. Thank you. You're very, very kind. So that's the first part of it. Now, they want to strip Section 235 because they effectively say that the Bill of Rights already contains all of the rights that would be required. In other words, you can speak the language that you choose. You can choose your friends in whichever way you want. To Section 235, which explicitly gives the right to self-determination, that's the one that they want gone. Why does the ANC want this one gone? Oppression. The ANC wants to break up Orania. They want to break up the town, I can't remember its name now, but the town just outside of Pretoria. They want to end those towns because spite. There's no reason for it. Orania takes no resources from South Africa. They pay their taxes. They do all of the work themselves. It's spite. That's why the MK and the ANC wants to get rid of Section 235, so that they can punish white people even more. Because what a lot of people need to understand here, Kleinfontein, that's the one, thank you. Yes, Kleinfontein. What a lot of people need to understand here is this was never BEE, affirmative action, employment equity, the 145 other race laws in this country was never about transformation. It was never about taking from white people and giving to black people. That was not the goal. That was not the initial idea. Some black people will get very rich, like Cyril Ramaphosa and like the cadres. which is great, right? Because it buys votes. But the idea from day one was punish white people. That's it. The ANC never actually forgave white people for apartheid because it was never even about apartheid. From day one, the ANC was a racist organization, an organization with one fundamental goal: kill the whites. This is our nation. We will do what we want to do. The evidence of this lies in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF had everything going for them. Zimbabwe was growing. The education system was strong. The economy was going well. And they allowed it to go to hell. And they will not reverse course. The ANC, the EFF, and the MK are praising Zimbabwe for the position that they're currently in. Why? Because they have chased away the whites. That's why they praise it. They don't care that people in Zimbabwe are starving. They don't care that Zimbabwe went from a net exporter of food to a net importer of food. They don't care about any of that because white people were punished. And that's the thing that's most important to them. More importantly to them is the fact that white people have nowhere to go. Once they start punishing the white people here in South Africa, it's not like Zimbabwe where the white people can just escape to South Africa. Zimbabwe will not take the white people back. Botswana will not take the white people. Mozambique will not take the white people. Namibia will not take the white people. And so they can really punish the white people to their heart's content. And the white people can't go anywhere. This is why President Trump accepting Afrikaners and other minority groups as refugees angers the ANC so much. This is why it drives them insane. Because the white people are supposed to be punished. And now they can escape and go live a great life in America. This is unacceptable to them. And so from their perspective, they will fight this at every single turn. They're going to increase the heat. They're going to take this, Section 235 of the Constitution, they're going to remove it, right? Which means Orania will be closed, Clairefontaine will be closed. They're going to remove freedom of speech to a great extent. They're going to make it impossible for podcasters to be podcasters. The conversation that you and I are having right now, it will just no longer exist, right? It will just end. We will not be allowed to have this because fundamentally the ANC wants full control so that they can do whatever it is that they want to do. So that's going to increase. These are the secondary repercussions that you and I are going to deal with once President Trump starts amping up the pressure on the ANC. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two is President Trump sort of makes the decision that every world leader prior to President Trump has made. And that is to say, I want to punish this country. And I understand that this is going to be tough for the people. I understand that the people are going to suffer as a result of this. But if the people don't want this, the people have to remove this government. Because that's the point of sanctions. For those of you who don't quite know, sanctions never fix any problems, right? Sanctions are incredibly inefficient at fixing problems. What you apply sanctions for is the hope that the people of the country eventually mobilize and remove the problem for you. That's the idea. And so I think that's what President Trump will ultimately do in scenario number two, is just cut off all trade to and from South Africa. Basically, sanction South Africa to hell and back. And there's one big difference. Russia was sanctioned by America, was sanctioned by Europe, and yet Russia was still able to survive. What allowed Russia to survive was the fact that they still had a pipeline between them and China that allowed them to get their fuel and get money from the Chinese for the fuel that they sell. And they were able to move some of their ships to India, to Iran, and to China because they were allowed to do so. South Africa is a little bit different. You see, the shipping lanes to and from South Africa is just two lanes. Just runs literally, here's South Africa, shipping lanes. Runs like this. You have a destroyer on this side and a destroyer on this side. The shipping lanes are closed. And America has a lot of destroyers. They can put 3 destroyers on each side. And suddenly, there's not a single ship that goes from South Africa or to South Africa without being taken, and then America just sell those goods because that's just how it's going to work. So South Africa has the potential to not only be sanctioned, but physically be sanctioned. It is possible for America to completely cut the throat of the South African economy and just go done. They can go further. They can sell South African debt, which would crush the economy. There's a whole bunch of stuff that the Americans could do. Because of bad governance by the ANC, our country does not have a foundation, a safety net to fall back on. And I believe that that is going to happen. If, let's use the word if, the midterms go the way of Trump. So right now, there's something very interesting happening in America, and I'll end on this. America has a place, as a country, MAGA is incredibly powerful, right? And MAGA is an incredibly powerful movement. But even though Republicans own the Congress, the House, as well as the Senate, because it's actually Congress upper and lower house, even though they own Congress and the Senate, they don't MAGA doesn't own Congress and the Senate. The Republicans do. And not all Republicans are MAGA. All MAGA are Republicans, but not all Republicans are MAGA. Now, the Republicans are working tirelessly to flip a lot of the rhinos out of the Republican Party and to replace them with MAGA Republicans. If that happens, and it's happening in almost every single state in America where these MAGA potential governors, potential congressmen, potential senators are being pushed, if that were to happen and MAGA was able to gain control, now I do think that there's going to be I don't think the Save America Act, for those of you that don't know, the Save America Act is effectively the act that every other country in the world has, but somehow American Democrats seem to pretend like it's a super racist act. In every country in the world, you can't vote unless you have an ID. In South Africa, if you want to go register to vote, you have to show your ID card. It's a picture of you with your name and your date of birth. Now, that's South Africa, the third world country in Africa. We have that system. But apparently in America, because they think that if you want to vote, you should be able to prove that you're a citizen, it's very racist, according to the Democrats. But I don't think the Save America Act is going to pass. Not in time, because right now you have those rhino Republicans that refuse to break the filibuster. And as long as the filibuster exists, they won't be able to get it over the finish line, which means Save America Act will not come into effect. But President Trump just signed an executive order, which is his right to do, to basically force the post office not to accept any mail-in ballots unless they can prove that the mail-in ballot came from someone that is in fact registered to vote and is an American citizen. The commander-in-chief does have the right to do that because the post office is a federal service. Therefore, it answers to the president of the United States of America. So President Trump is effectively enacting his own mini little Save America Act because Congress and the Senate is just not getting their stuff together. Now, it's going to go to court. There's going to be a number of provinces, states that's going to challenge it in court. It's most likely going to fail. The court cases aren't really going to go their way because under the president's powers for executive orders, the president does have the right to do this, right? He can tell the post office that you can't accept mail-in ballots unless they've been registered. And this I actually didn't come up with by myself. I listened to a Democrat lawyer explain that this is allowed. The president can do this, and it's going to be very difficult to overturn because ultimately the president isn't stepping on any American's right to vote. If you're American, you can vote. It's just if you're not American that you can't vote. And so it's going to be, you're going to have to try and make a case that there's not enough time. And there's going to be states that's going to try that. There's not enough time for everyone to register, but ultimately President Trump could get that through, right? If needs be, that can happen. Or maybe the Republicans get their act together and they actually pass the Save America Act. But if the Republicans if the Senate and the Congress go the way of Trump, you get more MAGA people in. I believe that next year is where we're going to see a lot of problems for the ANC and for South Africa. I believe that's when President Trump is really going to start focusing on South Africa specifically. It's already going to start this year, but I think next year is where it's going to really ramp up because the Republicans are already sick and tired of the ANC. You have multiple pieces of evidence of this. For those of you that don't know, this is the House Foreign Affairs Committee majority right now. Iran's terrorist regime is losing its grip on silencing their own people, so they are looking for support from weak partners abroad. It's disgusting to see South African officials standing alongside these terrorists while the regime kills thousands of its own people. This is from the American politicians. This isn't Trump. This isn't President Trump saying these things. These are congressmen and senators that are saying it's disgusting. So South Africa is in serious trouble. Even if President Trump wasn't the president, South Africa is in serious trouble because the American congressmen and senators have reached the end of the line, the end of the rope for South Africa. So that is coming. I think it's going to start this year, but I think it's really going to pick up speed next year. That's sort of my guess at the moment of what we can expect. If, however, and this is the one thing that the freedom fighters of South Africa could maybe look forward to, if President Trump, if it didn't go well in the midterms and the Democrats managed to win the midterms, South Africa is probably safe. South Africa is probably safe because the Democrats will take the next 2 years, the last 2 years of President Trump's term, and they will do what they did in the last 2 years of his first term. They will effectively just impeachment after impeachment after impeachment after impeachment. They'll block every single thing that he tries to do because that's all they have available to them. They'll just run the defense. That means that South Africa's problems will be postponed, but it will not be solved. The Democrats are actually going to shoot themselves in the foot at that point in time because Americans are going to be able to look at the past and it's going to remind them of something, regardless of how good or bad President Trump is in this year. If the Democrats spend the last 2 years blocking everything President Trump does, President Trump can effectively tell the American people, I was trying to save this country. And the Democrats denied it. They wanted this country to fail. Americans are going to look back and they're going to go, the Democrats did this in 2018. In 2020, we got Joe Biden, the worst president in America's history. Yes, even worse than Bush. And Americans are going to remember what the economy was like under Biden. Americans are going to remember what the border was like under Biden. And the Democrats are going to hand the Republicans the victory of a lifetime. It may actually make President Reagan's victory look like child's play. And for those of you that don't remember, President Reagan was able to win every single one of the 50 states of America. I believe it was in his second term. I think J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio on the ticket, they're going to do that. Because Americans are going to look and they're going to go, never again. So the Democrats will cut their own throat, but that means South Africa will have at least 2 more years where we will be spared of most of the anger because President Trump will be held up in fighting. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to look at. Let me just quickly look at all of the donations that came through. Thank you so much, by the way, to all of you that is donating and giving money. I truly appreciate that. Okay, so let's quickly see. Tasting with the $2. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate you. Black-only townships, good. White-only towns, bad. Tasting, yes and no. I think if these were townships, so for example, you'll never hear the ANC say anything about the white squatter camps that also exist just outside of Pretoria. Right, so there's the estimates are anywhere from 100,000 to about 300,000 white people who live in townships. And the ANC has never said, wow, the racism on these townships, right? They don't really care about that. They care about the white-only towns that are flourishing. You go to Orania and everything works, right? They were able to solve their problems with electricity long before Eskom even managed to get a handle on it. These are the ones that they want to go after, and there's a good reason for it. It makes the ANC look bad, right? Because when ordinary black South Africans look to stuff like Orania and they go, wait, everything works here. That's not good for the ANC, right? Because the ANC needs black people in South Africa to believe that the way they're governing the country is the best you can do. There is no better option. And so they really need to get rid of these organizations or these towns. David, thank you so much for joining the membership. Truly appreciate you for becoming a citizen of the Republic. Thank you, sir. You're far too kind. And then Quintus with the 70 Rand donation. Truly appreciate you, sir. I hear you and Rob Hersov saying USA should park the ships and cut off SA, and it would be great, but I don't think Trump or anyone in the US cares enough to allocate that much resources. So Quintus, it depends on how far President Trump wants to go to cut off China. Because you are correct. From a pure South African perspective, right? If we're just looking from our little perspective in the world, we aren't important enough. But China is. And if President Trump successfully manages to rid Iran from China and rid Venezuela from China and Cuba from China, President Trump finally opens the door to the final enemy, and that's South Africa. If he can take South Africa off the board, China stands isolated. And now China has a choice, right? China has to make a choice here. Either China goes to America with a deal, one that basically gives America everything that it ever wanted, and China gets to survive, or it's war. Right, so it's one of those two options. Neither option is good for the Chinese. The Chinese is not in a place where they can actually fight a war against America and win. But the Chinese also don't want to bend the knee. They're very proud as a nation. And so this is what President Trump is moving towards. And you know that the Chinese know. The problem is the Chinese doesn't know how to stop it. They don't know how to put an end to it. So in that sense, President Trump may just decide to do it and cut China off finally, once and for all. And that would also send a message to the rest of Africa, play by the rules or else, right? And the rest of Africa have already shown they're more than happy to work with America. It's really just a couple of Marxist African nations that want to stick it to America. Kenya just signed massive agreements with America. They're selling to America. Kenya is being invited to the G7. So clearly a lot of African nations have already said, look, we like America. We don't mind doing business with America because American companies are good and they do good business. And so, it's going to happen even more after that. And Tasting, thank you so much for another $2. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. Neva, Africa is my land. It's my country. I was born here. It's mine. If you don't like it, you're welcome to, get your weapons and remove us from it. If you truly feel like you can, if you feel like that is something that you might want to try, go for it, right? Let's see how far you get. You might succeed. You might succeed. You might kill every single white person in South Africa, in which case, good on you. Well played. But you might not succeed. And you have to ask yourself, what is that going to look like if you lose? Because the British also came here thinking we have the upper hand. We're more advanced. We're a greater fighting force. We're a greater civilization, a greater country. We spanked their little bottoms. They ultimately had to amass the largest fighting force in the history of the British Empire. And we almost spanked them again. So, go for it, my bro. Please. Happy hunting. We'll see. You're also probably going to find out that not every black person is on your side. And you might be very surprised when you realize that your side consists of people like Kim Heller, Peter Kriel, and Max de Pree. Not really people willing to fight, and not really that great at it either. So good luck. Your racism will eventually be defeated. I need you to understand this. Your black supremacy is not going to serve you in the long run. What you need to start realizing is that white people isn't your enemy. We are not your enemies. You are your own worst enemy. Every single problem that you are currently facing, every single issue that you currently see in this country is because of you. You created it. You are to blame for all the poor people in South Africa. You are to blame for the economy falling apart. You are to blame for the shacks that line the countryside of this nation. It's not white people. White people did not cause this. We've been trying desperately to fix this country, and you and your comrades have been destroying it. And until you take responsibility for your own actions, you'll never fix anything. Everything will just continue to fall apart, and you will eventually realize there's no one left to blame. So, yeah. Quintus with a 50 Rand donation. Truly appreciate you, sir. What does China lose when SA is off the board? So, China lose another dumping ground effectively for a lot of their goods. Because remember, China's biggest problem is that China has never been able, and they've been trying desperately for about the last 7 years, to shift their economy to a consumer economy. So the natural track for almost all countries is you get rich by producing, right? So you produce a bunch of stuff and you sell that stuff to other people and you get rich. But then what you want is for the people that are producing this stuff and selling it to other people to use that money to then become the customer of the goods, because you want a consumer economy. Because that means that more things can be consumed, more things can be produced that then can also boost your own economy. So now your country is not only producing stuff that other people buy, but it's also consuming the stuff that it's producing. So you sort of have this double dip effect. You're making money from other people, but also from your own people. The Chinese have been trying for about 7 years now, desperately trying to get a consumer economy going. The issue is the Chinese don't consume. They're not buying. And there's a reason for it. China has about 200 to 300,000 middle class and rich people. Roughly 70% of the entire population of China are dirt poor. Dirt poor. And if you ever want to see evidence of this, go to China and go outside the cities to the villages. There you will find people who don't own cars. They still live in huts. They fish and farm for themselves. There's no businesses. These villages have like one clinic that is state-owned, and that's it. They're not allowed to go into the cities. They're not allowed to work in the cities. They are the peasant class. The state leaves them alone for the most part because, well, that's just how it is. If you're lucky enough to get into the cities, that's luck, right? But most of their country is dirt poor. So yes, they have a great society, or they have a great population, although there might be a bit of an overstatement of how many people they actually have. But the communists very quickly realized it's impossible to make everyone rich. So they said, we'll just make some people rich and we'll keep the rest poor. We don't care about them. And even the people that are rich aren't consumers, right? They don't really buy a lot of stuff. And as a result of this, China has like one of the lowest consumer-based GDPs in the world. It's something like 45%. You look at America, and America's internal consumption sits at 71%, meaning that if the whole world stopped trading with America tomorrow, their economy, 71% of their economy is still going. Just because Americans are buying so much crap of their own stuff, right? So America is far less reliant on the rest of the world giving and selling stuff to them because Americans are buying so much of their own stuff and making so much of their own money, really, with all of the states competing with one another. China isn't capable of doing this. So China requires dumping grounds. They need to find countries that they can just sell a bunch of crap to. And South Africa is that country because China has lost a lot of the market that they had in America. They just started dumping most of their stuff here in South Africa. Look at all the cars. Have you guys seen the amount of Chinese cars on the roads? Dude, it's insane. It is insane how many Chinese vehicles are currently on the road. And then you look at the people who buy these Chinese vehicles, and I have not spoken to a single person that drives a Haval or a GWM who hasn't had serious problems. Like the car isn't as good. It's cheap. Like you can buy a brand new SUV for what? I saw Haval starts at something like 349,000 Rand for a beautiful SUV. I mean, it's a beautiful car, and it has all the bells and whistles. Just don't drive it. Once you drive it, you go, oh, this is a cheap piece of crap. I'm not saying that some of their cars might not be good, and I'm not saying that their cars won't eventually be good. It's sort of similar to the old school. If you guys remember when Japan and South Korea first started making cars, or even the French, there was a big period of time where you wouldn't buy a Renault or a Hyundai or a Hyundai, I think it was. You wouldn't buy these cars because they were sort of cheap. These days, they're good, right? They've had time to really get to a place where they're actually quite good, and you can now buy a Renault, and you know it won't be too bad. So I think the Chinese can eventually become a very good car making country, but they're not one right now. At least not from what I'm hearing from people who drive these cars. No, American cars are also really bad. Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that American cars are amazing. Like one of the jokes here in South Africa is Ford, right? I can't remember the joke now, but it's something like it's something to do with a guy standing next to the road, and what's he busy doing? He's waiting for someone to help him push, right? Something like that fix, standing next to a Ford. So yeah, like Ford, I don't know if Ford is that bad in America. Like maybe some of my American viewers can tell me whether or not you guys have a lot of problems with Ford, but we have a lot of problems with Ford. It might be that the Fords just don't really work well with our climate. With the heat or whatever it is here in South Africa, but Ford we have massive problems with Ford gearboxes. Like I've never driven a single Ford car where the gearbox didn't start making insane issues, or giving insane issues. And then the engines also manage to overheat and cause all sorts of problems. So I'm not sure, right? I'm genuinely not sure. It's really good here in America. So it might be Bandit that Ford is just, because I know Ford is like the Americans love Ford, right? And I don't think that the Americans just love Ford because they break all the time, right? It's probably that the Fords in America are good. And it's fine because they're made for the American climate. They're made for the American roads. Just here in South Africa, they really don't work. So yeah, it is what it is. GG Evans with the $5. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. Trump really is making S bricks or poo bricks. North Korea is making moves to abandon China. They remove socialism from their constitution. North Korea? I have to go look into that because I don't know about that. Like North Korea is like the most communist nation ever. I would have to go look into that because, look, if North Korea ever actually abandoned China and became more open, that would be huge. I don't know if that will ever happen. I'll go look into it, Evans. I'll go look into it. Thank you so much for the $5. Dude, really appreciate you. Yakuslaber with a 30 Rand donation. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you. You guys are far too kind. They remove the word, not the ideology. It's a signal. Oh, well, maybe. Let's look at what happens next, because it might be, right? That at some point the father or maybe even his daughter decides, look, we want to live in a country that, our people aren't starving the whole time. So that is entirely possible, and that would actually be good, right? Compared to SA, it's probably just lower quality cars that get sold in SA. The Good Shepherd, I would not put that past it, right? It might just be that the American or Ford just exports lower quality cars to South Africa, or maybe the factories that make them in America, because I don't believe that the Fords that come to South Africa are made in America. Mainly because we drive on the opposite side of the road, so a lot of those factories don't really produce the same cars. We have, I think, BMW in South Africa is one of the few factories that actually produce also for the American market. So it has two tracks, one that makes for all those that drive on the right side of the road. And by that, I don't mean the right side of the road. I mean the left side of the road, but it is the right side of the road. And then also for the Americans. Sorry, but I don't get why you guys will just why do you always want to be different? Because I don't understand this. The Americans, for some reason, everyone else drives on the right side of the road. Everyone else goes, this just makes sense. The Americans like, nah, fam, we good. We won't be doing this. Everyone else in the world goes, you know what, guys, this Fahrenheit imperial system sucks. Let's go for metric. The Americans go, nope, we don't want to. We'll use liquid ounces and just 400 different ways of describing something that milliliters and grams would take care of almost immediately. Whereas the best way is just science. Don't get me wrong, I love America, right? I have a bunch of American friends, and I truly love America. But yeah, David, thank you so much for the donation, dude. Really appreciate you. Let me just quickly see if you sent a message alongside your donation. Stop donation is truly appreciated, sir. Thank you. Oh, David, no message, but still, thank you so much for the 100 Rand donation, dude. I really appreciate you. I'm a German car fan, except BMW. I don't know anything about cars. So, I'm not a fan of anything. I'm just sort of like, whatever. If it's got wheels and it'll take me from point A to point B, I'll drive it. It's fine. I'm useless when it comes to cars. So I want to talk about a final thing. The final official topic for the day, and then we'll do more just chatting. I want to talk about the return of colonialism. A lot of people might actually go, wait, what? What do you mean? Everything I'm about to discuss is stuff that could potentially happen, but I'm not suggesting that it will happen. So just to be clear, I'm not for a moment saying that this will happen, but there is a couple of things that you need to be aware of, right? So there's the one constant throughout the world has always been that the strong oppress the weak. This is the constant. It has happened throughout history in every single era. Every single era. The strong oppresses the weak. The strong takes what the weak has, and the weak can't take it back. This is just how it operates. Throughout history, we've had empires come and go, fall, sometimes to disease, sometimes to internal strife, like the Roman Empire, and other times to other empires conquering those empires. But at its core, it is important to understand how we got to colonization. Because colonization is a fairly new concept based on a very old concept. So prior to colonization, what you would have is just complete annexation, right? So when the Romans conquered a territory, they didn't colonize that territory. That territory became part of the Roman Empire. It was now just a province of the Roman Empire. And while colonies technically work the same way, there's slight differences. right? There are slight differences. But colonialization is just an expansion of an already existing idea. Um, Oftentimes, what you would have with a lot of colonies is a sort of independent governance within those colonies. So even though you are a colony, you do have the ability to do your own thing, and you pay taxes and stuff like that to the host nation. You know, that sort of, again, it also looked different for every single empire, right? Not every single nation that had colonies worked exactly the same. Some, for example, the French allowed the people from their colonies to just move to France. The British never really allowed that. So every single nation also had a very different. But the point is, empires have always existed. It is untrue for you to sit there and think, oh, but the Europeans were so evil. Look at what they did to the rest of the world. The Africans were doing the exact same thing to the Africans, right? You had at least two major civilizations in Africa, and they also oppressed the people that weren't part of that civilization. They also colonized massive areas of Africa. They never actually went outside of Africa, and there is actually a reason for that. We'll get into why Europe was able to do what it did, and Africa could never do it themselves. We'll get into that. But okay, ultimately, what ends up happening is we have sort of ancient Sumer. We have the Mesopotamian sort of empires. We have the Babylonian Empire. We have the Egyptian Empire. Then we have the Greek Empire. We have the Roman Empire. We have the Ottoman Empire. And slowly but surely, we start to get to a European empire, right? And I say European because these countries, these individual countries in Europe, would basically take turns to decide who's the most powerful. And, you know, you had the same thing happening in China, in Japan, but these were sort of located on their own side of the world, and they were sort of giving each other trouble. So we're not going to be focusing on them too much today. But okay, so you have these European kingdoms that are constantly fighting each other. Now, let's just first address a big elephant in the room here. The idea, pushed by freedom fighters, that the only reason Europe ever got powerful is because it stole Africa's resources. This only works if you start your history after Europe already got powerful. Right? So if you start your history the day after the first Europeans arrive in Africa, congratulations. Europe only got filthy rich because of what they stole from Africa. It does not explain why Europe was so much more powerful than Africa in the first place. Because when the Europeans arrived in Africa, there wasn't a single African tribe that could stand against them. Because they were coming with guns and cannons and technologies that the Africans had never even seen before. Right? So you're not making a case for Europe. Europe got richer as a result of Africa, but it didn't get rich or powerful because of Africa. It's important to understand this. Now, why did this happen? Why is it that Europe was so much more advanced than Africa? Well, the racists will tell you it's skin color, which anyone that has ever met a white leftist will know that that's not true. Skin color does not determine intelligence. If it did, people like Kim Hiller and Max de Pree and Peter Kriel would not exist. Right? If skin color was, in fact, the determining factor in stupidity. It's not genetics either. It's location. It's location and industrialization. So allow me to explain. Africa is incredibly well located and well situated for nomadic tribes. There's an abundance of resources, but it's far away from each other. So you'll go to one place, you'll live there until there's no more resources left, and then you'll pack and you'll go. Right? Usually a couple of seasons, if you're lucky. Europe is incredibly badly situated for nomadic tribes because there's not a lot of resources, and for about 9 months out of the year, most of it's frozen. So nomadic tribes really suffer in Europe. Nomadic tribes thrive in Africa. But then there's a flip side. civilizations require, at its core, agriculture. If you cannot grow your own food enough to supply more than 145 people with food, you can't have a civilization. A civilization is required for progress, because it is only once we reach the comfortable civilization stage that we start to see progress take place. And guess what? Africa is great for nomadic tribes. Lots of resources just lying about. Terrible for agriculture. Before irrigation becomes a thing, you're not farming in Africa. Not really. You had limited with like the Zimbabwean empire that was able to farm to some extent. The problem is that droughts and things like that is very common in Africa. And so if before you had the ability to actually bring water from where it isn't to where you need it, if it's not raining and you don't have food, right? Europe, on the flip side, very bad for nomadic tribes because resources are very scarce and about 9 months of the year it's frozen, but it is great for agriculture. It has a lot of land that is quite fertile and it rains all the bloody time, right? So you don't really need to figure out how to get the water from where it is to where it isn't, because the water just comes from the sky for the most part. And so Europe, and I'm oversimplifying this because I'm not trying to give you guys a full lecture on the history of civilizations, but Europe effectively has to form civilizations. It's very difficult for small tribes of 100 to 145 people to exist, but it's very easy for large groups of 1,000 to 2,000 to 20,000 to 100,000 people to exist and farm and grow, right? And so Europe almost very quickly go from, and this is really from the Roman Empire. As soon as the Roman Empire collapses, the barbarian tribes of the Saxons start to pull together into a new civilization that would form kingdoms. The Gauls, or what would become the French, they sort of do the same thing, starting to form from the tribes, form these civilizations because they just saw how the Romans did it, right? And so, and the Romans saw how the Egyptians did it, and so on and so forth, right? But so they take all of that technology from the Romans and apply it to themselves, and now you have these small little kingdoms that pop up. Africa can't do the same. Life is very difficult in Africa for a civilization. And so Africa, it's impossible when you're wondering where the food is coming from tomorrow to also think about, hey guys, is there like a cool way to irrigate a farm? The people in the town is going to be like, what the hell are you talking about, bro? We need to go find food, right? We're going to die here. And so ultimately, you have this sort of impasse where Europe has to form civilizations in order to survive. Africa can't form civilizations, not big ones, not big enough to actually explode. So let's go to Europe now, right? So what happens in Europe is you now have, from these tribes, you have a bunch of kingdoms that come to fruition. These kingdoms, guess what? They do what humans have always done. They go to war with each other. And they constantly fight one another, right? It's just constant fighting. Because why wouldn't you? You just, that's what nations do. We fight. Because you have resources that I want, right? You happen to be on steel. I want that steel. So let's have a fight about it. This war ultimately forces these nations to progress, because war is the greatest way to progress technologically. If you want to progress technology, go to war. You'll progress insanely fast, right? And so eventually, Europe reaches another impasse. It has exploited all of its resources. And by that, I don't mean the resources are done, but all the mines are already up and running, and they're taking as much out of the ground as they possibly can, given the technology that they have. At that time, they wouldn't have had the technology to go kilometers underground. And so they're exploiting what they can exploit. The problem is they want more war, right? We're constantly still at war. So what do we do now? Well, we happen to just have discovered this place that is incredibly rich in resources, and there's also no kingdoms there, right? There's no civilizations to stop us. And so they just go and take it. Because why wouldn't you? You're at war. You're fighting for your own survival. So of course you're going to go take whatever the hell you can. Is it right? No, of course not. It's not morally right, but that's human nature. Humans have always done this, right? So this isn't, I'm not making an argument for good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm telling you the facts. How does it work, right? And if you're England during the 100-Year War and someone comes to you and says, guys, surely we can't take the resources of Namibia, right? As a stupid example. This is unfair. And at that time, we weren't doing it, but imagine for a second, right? Or imagine someone came to you, you're the King of England, and someone came to you and said, during the 100 Years' War, it's not okay for us to exploit the resources of the Scottish. That king would look at you and go, are you out of your mind? The French are trying to conquer us. I couldn't care less about the human rights of the Scots. I couldn't care less. We need to survive, right? And so all of these different kingdoms are desperate for resources, desperate for more steel, more iron, more gold, more silver, whatever the hell they can get their hands on, because all of this leads to better war, right? And so the fighting continues, and now eventually you have all of these colonies, right? All of these colonies start popping up around the globe. The colonies start to unwind really after the Second World War, right? So you have the German power that rises up. The whole world is embroiled in this war. It leaves most of the colonized nations or the colonial nations completely bankrupt, right? And so for a lot of them, for England, for example, most of their colonies aren't given away out of the goodness of their own hearts. It's given away because they physically no longer have the funds to maintain these colonies. And they understand that if any of these colonies were to realize how weak they are, these colonies would just be able to rise up and the British crown would just not have the money to fight them. And so they start giving away a lot of these colonies and sort of giving them free option. Do you want to be part of us or do you not? And a lot of them accept it, but some of them decide, no, we want to be republics or whatever it is. But most of the colonies are sort of given away. It has to do with fundamentally, right, with a new way of thinking. So we go from the era of strongman politics, where the strong take what they want and the weak suffer what they must, to an era of cooperation. And we've spoken about this before. This is also where geoeconomics starts to become a bit of a dream. And eventually you'll have realpolitik completely replaced by geoeconomics. But whatever the case, we're entering an era of cooperation. And the idea sort of starts to build from about the 1940s onwards, from the 1945 onwards. We've spoken about this, the World Trade Organization and the World Health Organization. All of these get founded in the first 5 years after the Great War. And in the preceding 60 or 70 years, the world will come ever closer on just about every angle, right? We will start working closer together. The idea, of course, remains the same. The idea, especially once globalization really sort of in the mid-1970s, 1975 onwards, you start to get this idea that maybe globalization is a thing, but the term is not yet coined, so it's not called globalization. But there is this idea of you're making this thing that I can just buy from you, and I'm making this thing that I can just sell to you, right? So we can trade with each other, and it's much more prosperous than me attacking you for that thing. Because war is expensive, so I could just trade it with you, right? Rather than take it from you. All good and well, right? And that sort of starts to happen, and then in the 1990s, it really explodes, right? You have this explosion of globalization, where the whole world sort of collectively decides this is the end of history. And Fukuyama had a lot to do with this. His book, The End of History and the Last Man, really sort of captures what is the belief at that time in America, and America manages to convince the entire world of this. The idea now is that all of the world will become democratic capitalist societies, and we'll just we'll just have this peaceful period of time for all eternity. Of course, that doesn't happen because, as it turns out, when you tell companies that you can produce things anywhere and sell them everywhere, the companies don't think, oh, but we make stuff in America, we sell it to the Americans, and we also give jobs to the Americans. The companies think it's cheaper for us to make this thing in China and then just take the money from the Americans. Right? So why don't we just do that instead? And so what you end up having is the West, which was the most powerful nation. And FYI, for those of you who don't know, this is sort of how every single empire in the history of the world has fallen. Right? Every single empire has fallen in this way. So what happens is as the empire rises, the empire sort of has a bunch of technological advantages, oftentimes in the form of agriculture, in the form of warfare. And as this empire gets more and more powerful, the empire eventually starts to export a lot of this culture and of these inventions to nations around them. And ultimately, the nation that becomes the conqueror of the empire conquers the empire with its own technology. And this has happened every single time. And so the West starts doing this. We just give our technology to the Chinese, and the Chinese get very rich selling that technology back to us as we go. And I'm talking about us now as the West, not as South Africa, because we were busy with our own things for the last 32 years. But ultimately, okay, so you have this period of globalization. The one problem that none of the elites ever actually thought about was, how do the workers of these first world nations actually buy these cheap goods if all of their jobs keep going to third world countries? Like, it's all good and well to say that, well, we can make an Apple iPhone for, I believe the last time I checked, it costs around $15 to make an Apple iPhone in China. All of the goods and stuff into it, not the R&D, the research and discovery. That's usually what costs so much. But it's super cheap to make. And then, of course, they sell it for $1,000 because that's what it's worth, apparently. But if the workers in America lost their jobs because all of your factories are now in China, how are they going to buy the phone? You see the problem. The elites sort of just thought about the immediate money that they're about to save and make, and no one ever stopped to ask, well, when exactly do the workers actually get to also buy stuff if they're just constantly losing their jobs because their jobs are being taken by the third world? And as a result of this, you have a backlash. President Trump in 2016 was that backlash. It was the ordinary man on the street saying enough. Enough of this. We need to eat too, right? And you can't keep hollowing us out for your own gains. And so we have the New World Order that is enacted. It's not the New World Order, it's the Old World Order. We have tried for the last 70 years, this globalization, all singing Kumbaya together. It didn't work. It failed. All President Trump is doing now is going back and saying, look, let's just go back to the normal system, the system that we all understood and it worked. The system where we, America, is the superpower and we tell you all what you can and cannot do. And if you don't agree with us, we can go to war and we can fight each other. If that's how you feel, we can fight. Right? But we're going to be the benevolent dictator of the world. We're going to tell you what you can do and what you can't do. And that's the end of this, end of the discussion. And that's ultimately where we are now. Whether you agree with it or not, nothing I'm telling you here is me telling you whether it's right or wrong or anything. I'm just telling you how President Trump and the Americans currently think about this. We are the strongest nation on earth. Why the hell can't we tell you what to do? And the truth is, why can't they? They have bigger bombs. They get to tell you what you can and cannot do, right? Iran is finding that out now. So that's the world that we're in now. But guess what? It's the world that a lot of the Western world is now starting to realize they're a part of. You're already hearing it in Europe. Europe must be strong again. Now, I don't believe we're ever going to go back to European kingdoms. I think Europe is going to become the United States of Europe. I think that is the future for Europe. Unless the European nationalists can actually pull a hat out of their a rabbit out of the hat and crush the EU, I do think the EU is eventually going to become a kingdom. Its own version of the United States of Europe, if you will. But in that world, in a strongman world, in a world where the strong do what they must and the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must, eventually the strong get to a point where they say, you have what I want. So Europe, now in a world where America is one of the superpowers, Europe is another superpower, Russia and China are superpowers. Now they look at Africa and they go, well, you have uranium. I happen to want uranium. I could buy it from you, or I could just take it. And before you think that will never happen, think about the capacity of the human heart to be evil. It not only can it happen, it will happen. Eventually, the superpowers of the world will wake up and go, wait, why are we negotiating with these guys? I don't have to negotiate with you. I have the bigger gun. You're gonna do as I say, or else. Right? And that is my contention for why I believe it's not impossible that colonialism will return. I believe that it will return. And I believe that Africa has made it easy. Because in the 60 years that Africa, or at least most of Africa, has had its freedom, not a single one of those nations have managed to rise to the point where it becomes very difficult to conquer. Most African nations are dirt poor. Most African nations have a military, but that military is mostly just a bunch of bloated warlords. And so it's like Africa is rolling out the red carpet to all of these nations around the world that is going to become very powerful very soon and saying, well, here we are, come take us. So yeah, I genuinely think we may actually see colonialism return. Not saying that I want that, and I'm hoping that it won't, because there is also another thing to consider, and that is moral creep. Right? Creep is just the best word for it, but morality does evolve, right? And so, if you go back 2,000 years, slavery wasn't even a question, even though there are clear passages in the Bible that tells us that slavery is wrong and that we shouldn't have slaves. It takes nearly 1,500 years for the Christians to finally go, we're ending slavery now. Because humans had to get there, right? You can't just wake up. If you're in a world where slavery is just a thing and everyone just has slaves, you don't question that, right? And to start to question that would create so many problems that it would literally lead to people just destroying themselves. And so we can talk about how I believe how God eventually deals with slavery and eventually gets humans to accept that slavery isn't right, because you have evidence of the church fathers already 100 years after Christ writing about slavery and asking the question, is this okay? Should we be doing this? Right? No one else was asking this. Not a single pagan philosopher or atheist philosopher was asking, is slavery good or bad? They just sort of wanted more slavery. In fact, the pagans of the Roman Empire thought that Julius Caesar was the greatest man alive for killing 1 million French people, the Gauls at that time, and enslaving another million. They thought that made him the greatest man in the history of the world. The Christian philosophers were the ones writing about this and going, Don't they? Yeah. Is that something we should be doing? Should we be celebrating this? This seems a little odd. So it does happen. And it is possible that we as humans have reached the moral point where even in a world where the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must, we sort of go, there are some lines that we will not cross. We're not going to become colonies. We're not going to make colonies. Instead, we're just going to apply severe pressure on those nations and then reward them for their compliance, right? If you join us, we'll take care of you. But ultimately, I do think that Africa is steering itself towards a century or more of effectively just dancing to the tune of the more powerful nations around it. That's sort of the thought experiment at the moment that we're going to have to keep an eye on. We might all be dead before we even get evidence of this, because these things can take a very long time to actually happen. But I can see it. And I just need to also clarify, I don't think the world map at that time will still look the way that it looks now. Because this is, again, one of those beliefs that people have who are left-wing and people who have bought into the end of history fallacy. That sort of think, wow, this is who we are, this is how we were made, we're just going to be like this forever. That is the furthest thing from the truth. This is the longest period of time that the map of the world has remained fixed. It's going to change again. And it's going to change violently in some places, peacefully in others. But there is going to be a lot of movement. And I don't think South Africa's map is going to look the same in the next 10 years. I do believe that in 10 years from today, South Africa will have one of three futures. The first is balkanization, which will lead to a lot of civil war. The second is federalization, so just federal states that effectively do their own thing. Or it'll just be eradication. We'll just be at civil war, right? And we'll just be fighting each other constantly. That's sort of the future that I think for South Africa at the moment. All right, let me just quickly see here. Wolfan funding. Niwa. Actually, first, Scribble. Scribble with the 70 Rand donation. Truly appreciate you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for warning them, Stefan. Their only way out is Night Game, ARG. True, Scribble. Niwa, how you doing? Thank you so much for the $5 donation. Really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What is the truth of Shadowlands that Sylvanas is speaking of, you think? You were always great at theory crafting. Niwa, I haven't spoken about World of Warcraft in literally years. I think it's like 2.5 years ago that I've lost even looked at World of Warcraft. I don't even know what's currently going on there. And I think that storyline specifically for Shadowlands was abandoned. I think that's why you got Sylvanas promising that we're going to see the truth of what is in the Shadowlands. And I think the truth was ultimately that we are all just pawns in the game of the gods, right? But they abandoned that story because Steve Denuser had other plans for gold bosses and whatnot. So, that's why we got the rushed end to Shadowlands, and Shadowlands ultimately just fell flat. But that's a whole, that's sort of old school, those are videos that I made years ago. I don't play WoW anymore. I don't even really play games anymore, to be quite frank. I don't have time. Someone wanted to ask me a question. And I do apologize. I was literally in the middle, and I don't want to interrupt myself because I then usually forget what I was talking about, or I'll just end up repeating a bunch of stuff again. But someone came in. I can't remember who it was. Someone came in asking if they could ask a question, and I saw that message. And then I don't know if you actually asked your question, but you are more than welcome to ask whatever it is you want. If I can answer it, I'll answer it. If I don't have an answer for you, I'll tell you. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what the truth is there. Israel has a big Islamic problem. The ANC supports Iran and its proxies, such as Hezbollah, ISIS, and Hamas. Anita, 100%. And I think the Americans are starting to realize. Esther, how you doing? For us who are old-fashioned and don't like internet, can you give us a bank account number so we can do an EFT gift. Is there? Yeah, sure. To be fair, though, if you look at the stub link, right? If you look at the stub link that I have in the description down below, it's a direct EFT, right? So you put your card number in and you can make a direct EFT. Stub is a South African company. So you're not giving it to PayPal or working through some other company. It's a South African company that allows for South Africans to make direct donations. So you make your donation and it goes through Stub right into my bank account. So if that is, if that solves the problem, it's a bit, I would have to go look into how I can make my bank account number available without, because that seems like it could be a dangerous move on the internet. So I would have to look into how I can do that in a way that still protects privacy, but also allows you to do that. But mostly, I just appreciate the fact that you even want to give money, Esther. It really is appreciated. That being said, Islam does have a junior party in the GNU, so it is a real concern. Oh, yeah, but look, dudes, Islam is a serious problem in South Africa. And it's part of why I think we are going to get into trouble. Because I think there are relationships between South Africa and the Islamist terrorists of the world that no one really knows about. Well, the Americans probably know about it, but we don't know about it. And I think the ANC, I think the ANC is panicked about that as well. So the ANC is trying their best to convince the rest of the world that whatever the Americans do next, it's just to punish the ANC. Right? The Americans are just racists that just hate black people. That's what I think is actually happening here. Senora Brew, which ideology? What do you mean? Free women? Are you talking about Islam? I want people to be free from Islam because Islam isn't good for anyone. Islam is just it's a really, really bad religion. And in my opinion, it's not a religion that is in any way, shape, or form congruent or compatible with decent societies. Thinking about it, it goes back to Mandela. I think the thing is we don't have so much fancy stuff here in SA, so they are taking their time with us. Determining you're probably also not wrong about that. It's not a mystery. Socialist Marxists go and weaken the society, then Islamists take over. It happens so much all around the world. Saint, I think so. I'll share with you a theory that I have that I'm not yet convinced of, or at least I should say I'm convinced of this, but I don't yet have evidence for it. So I'll start with this. I do not believe that there is such a thing as a good communist. I don't believe in this idea of the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I genuinely don't believe that. Because it would suggest that there is such a thing as a person with good intentions. And I have never seen such a person. Every single person that I've ever seen do anything in this world has always been for selfish reasons. Right? They have a selfish need to achieve something, and then we'll lie to ourselves, right? We'll tell ourselves, oh, but I'm actually just doing this for their sake, right? I'm just trying to help them. But really, it's for yourself. You're doing this because you want to do this thing for whatever reason, rhyme, or purpose. And so when you look at Marxists specifically, these are people who, in my opinion, genuinely hate humans. They love themselves and they believe that they have the answer to all of life's problems. But really, the problems that they're trying to solve isn't the problems that for other people. It's their own problems that they want solving. If you listen to most Marxists, what is it that they want? They want a state that takes care of other people. Why? Because they don't want to work. They don't want responsibility. They want other people to take responsibility on their behalf. They want free healthcare. But healthcare isn't free. Someone else has to pay for it. So really, the fight that they're fighting isn't for themselves. Isn't for other people. It's for themselves. It's what they want, right? They like the idea. So it comes in two forms. One is just they're lazy, and so their idea is everyone else should take responsibility for me. The other is genuinely just authoritarian. They are authoritarian to the max, and they like the idea of being able to tell other people what they can and cannot do and punishing people that they disagree with. Now, when you look at Marxists all throughout history, you can look at all of the Marxists from Lenin, Stalin, all the way through. You can look at China. There's a couple of things that's very, very important here. The first, every single one of these people are narcissists. To the man. You will not find a single person in the Soviet Union, in a position of power that isn't a giant narcissist. In fact, the one truth of pretty much all of these communist leaders is that they kill anyone who disagrees with them. That's a telltale sign of a narcissist, right? Well, you do not disagree with me. How dare you? Right? And to a man, they are all authoritarian. Meaning, I know what it is, right? I know what the truth is. I know what you should and should not be doing, and therefore, I'll kill you if you don't listen, because I know best. Now there are, and this is very sad, but there is a type of technology that breeds narcissism. Social media. And we can see it. You have psychologists like Jonathan Haidt that have been warning about this for over a decade. With the use of social media, we are starting to see a sharp increase in narcissistic tendencies in young people. Young people are becoming so obsessed with themselves that they genuinely stop caring about those around them. They genuinely just could not care about what anyone else has to say, what anyone else thinks. Once you look at that, the actions and the behaviors of the left starts to make sense. What happens when you disagree with a leftist? They cancel you. And if they could, they would crucify you. They would kill you if it was up to them. Right? Like, a lot of leftists will literally kill you for disagreeing with them, because that's just what they are, right? They're narcissists. Narcissists do not suffer disagreement. And so the problem is, if you're a narcissist bred by social media, and to be fair, they're not alone, right? All humans have narcissistic tendencies. We need to be clear about that. Narcissism isn't this only leftist thing. All humans have that tendency. It just depends on whether or not you feed that tendency, right? Now, sadly, in the left, there's a lot of feeding into that tendency at the moment, and their whole people on the right tend to submit themselves to God, right? The right is a lot more religious. And because we submit ourselves to God, we understand that we are also weak and failed. And therefore, it helps us to deal with the natural tendency that humans just have to be arrogant and prideful and narcissistic. Because the left doesn't have religion, and for the most part, the left, whatever religion they have twisted and changed in order to glorify the self again. This is why when you look at leftist churches, they preach homosexuality is beautiful and God is a woman, right? Basically, all of these heretical things, because it's about the self. It's about glorifying the self. You are absolutely perfect just the way you are. And if God doesn't like you, God needs to change. Like, that's the philosophy of the left. That's where the narcissism is now. So the left used to be like, we don't care about Christ. We don't care about Christianity. We don't care about religion. Death to all Christians. The level of narcissism has now grown to the point where the left is going, well, if God wants me, he needs to change. And so now suddenly they're also bringing in churches to sort of become this glorification little factories of the self, right? And that's ultimately where we are now. But if you have this group of people that are obsessed with social media drives narcissism and actually increases narcissistic tendency, which leads to authoritarianism. There is only one political philosophy for you: communism. No other political philosophy affords you that amount of personal power and the ability to punish those that you disagree with. So if you want to understand why we're dealing with so many communists today, you have to understand that we're dealing with so many authoritarians today because there's so many narcissists today because of social media. That's my working theory at the moment. Everything I just say to you is true. Just how it happened, I think that's how it happened, so that's my hypothesis. But I can't say for certain that that's true, right? Because I don't have the money to pay someone to do the research and actually look at whether or not that's true. And I haven't been able to find any large-scale studies yet that sort of look into this to see if my hypothesis can be supported. So that's just sort of from myself to you guys. Hopefully that's a bit interesting. Natalie, how you doing? I've literally had these discussions with my children that are teens or young adults, the same theory. Yeah, I do think if you're a parent, you should probably not have your children on social media. You should probably keep your children off social media for, I would argue, at least the age of 16. If you can, do it even longer, but social media is bad, right? It's really bad. I would also say to the men, gentlemen, if you can, marry a good wife, marry a good woman that is going to be a good mother, work your ass off so that you can provide, so that she doesn't have to work, so that she can be a full-time mother, because your kids are going to need her. No one is ever going to care about your children as much as your wife will, because it's her children as well. Because the world is getting scary. It's getting very scary. And the schools are not designed to equip your children to be able to deal with the universe around them. The schools are not designed to teach your children critical thinking. In fact, they're designed for the exact opposite. They're designed to create good little workers. They're designed to create good little voters. Kids who don't question authority, don't question the power structure, and will just do whatever the politicians tell them to do. So, yeah, women, in whichever way you can, try to empower your husband as much as possible so that he can ultimately retire you and you can become a stay-at-home mom. Of course, if you don't want to, that's again your choice. But just know that you are most likely putting your children at a disadvantage. It's not impossible, because you can still be a great mother and a great father even though both of you are full time working, it just, I think, takes a lot more. You have to really work a lot harder. You have to be present after a full day of work. Both you and your wife have to get home and be present in your children's lives, right? You can't bring work with you. So it takes more effort, but it can be done, right? Um, Trax, how you doing, sir? Respect your path of enlightenment. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate that. There's a YouTuber professor I followed named Dr. Sam Vaknin. He's a diagnosed narcissist and one of the foremost researchers in the study of BPD. I find his stuff useful. Saint, I'll check that out. I'm a huge fan of psychology, so I'll definitely check that out. As of now, my daughter and I do coin collecting together every day. Nice, Natalie. Richard, how you doing, sir? From day one, have been stay-at-home mom. I think that's good. And if you can afford to retire your wife, and if you're a woman and you can afford not to work, I think you should not work, because the most important job you have is literally bringing up the next generation of humans. I cannot think of a more important job. If we could pay you for that, the money would be incalculable. Internet Gangster, how you doing, sir? See more than we realize. Celeste, how you doing? It's circle with Marxism. Yeah, I don't, like I said, it's a theory at the moment for me, but it's one that I feel quite strongly about. I'm a stay-at-home dad. My current profession is dying. I only work once every 2 weeks. Jay, how you doing, sir? I'm sorry to hear that. I'm genuinely sorry to hear that. I will say, though, necessity is the mother of all invention. And all I will ask is that you be very careful, Jay, that you don't surrender yourself to your circumstance. You're a man. Men need to conquer. Don't allow your current situation to steal that need from you, because it might feel easier to just sort of accept this is what it is, but it will kill you. There will come a time, maybe a year or a decade from now, where you will hate the very people that you now seem to love. You will hate them. And your wife will hate you. Your kids will hate you because of your frustration. Men must conquer. It's a must. So just think, try something new. What's the worst that can happen? Like, genuinely, what's the worst that can happen? You could fail. Well, then try something else. Just keep going until something works. That's going to give you so much more clarity. So much more clarity. KB, how you doing? Siege, how you doing, sir? Fawn, how you doing, sir? I've worked the last shifts on a few professions as things change. Got to roll with it. True. I think, you see, and that's the problem with our psychology, the way we're built, not just men, but women as well. We oftentimes do the things that is worse for us. So I'll give you guys an example, right? After school, I went to study, and I've always been an incredibly jovial guy, right? I was, during my time at university, I was known in all of Hatfield Square. I could walk into Good Force, which was like a bar club sort of thing. I could walk into Good Force, and literally as I walk in, random people would scream my name and just be like, "Sup, dude, how you doing?" I don't remember them at all, but I must have been there yesterday, and they must have seen me because I was too drunk to remember. I was just friends with everyone, and I would constantly have parties, and there would be more than 100 people at my parties because I was friends and I just love people. Finished university. In my last 2 years of university, I discovered World of Warcraft. Right. At the time, I'm still going out drinking, but I'm also playing World of Warcraft. My last year of university, I'm just playing World of Warcraft. I don't leave. I stopped drinking, stopped hanging out with any of my friends. I'm just playing WoW, right? That's now my new life is World of Warcraft. Finished university, sat after university for a full year. I didn't do anything. I sat in my apartment that my father was paying for with money that my father was giving me, just playing WoW. I wouldn't go for a job because the job would take away from my ability to play WoW. I would literally just sit there and play World of Warcraft every single day. And then I would tell my dad, yeah, I can't find work. I'm looking. And then I would just play video games. So finally, after a year, my dad goes, that's enough. I'm done paying. I've paid for all of your university. You're on your own now, right? In that moment, what I should have done is I should have gone out and find a job. That's what I should have done. I should have gotten up off my ass and I should have gone and get a job. Instead, what I do is I phone my aunt, who now lives in Polokwane, and I say to her, I need a place to stay. And my aunt, being loving as ever, goes, you're welcome to come stay with us. I pack all my stuff in the car, I drive back home, and I go stay with my aunt and uncle, right? And I stay there with them for probably 4 years. No, not that long. Let's say 3 years. But I stay with them, still just playing games. I'm not doing anything. I'm just playing video games. Every time an opportunity arises for me to take responsibility for my life, I run the other way. At this point, I've gained probably 60 kilograms already, right? So I went from a slightly chubby guy in high school to obese at this point, right? I'm fatter than what I am now, and I'm quite fat now, right? So I don't have any friends. I don't talk to anyone. I don't spend time with anyone. I just play video games. That's all I do. Fast forward quite a long time, right? I'm about 35 at this point, 36 at this point. I'm at a place now where depression isn't even the right word. Because I'm not depressed. I'm not unhappy. I'm just nothing. Like I remember my aunt asked me once, how are you doing? And I said to her, I'm good. And she's like, well, that doesn't sound convincing. How are you doing? And I said to her, I don't know. I'm just neutral. And she's like, well, how long have you just been neutral? And I said to her, I think I've always just been, I'm not doing good. I'm not doing bad. I'm just whatever. And she said, well, think if something were to happen tomorrow, how would that make you feel? You know, if you died tomorrow, how would you feel about that? And I said, oh, then I die. It's fine. Like I genuinely got to a point where I could not care whether I lived or died. Life, all right. Death, all right. It's fine. Whatever. You know, I'm not here doing anything of value. So if I were to die, that would also be of very, very little value to me. And then about 2 years ago, actually, I think it's now almost exactly 2 years ago, I meet Christ. I come to faith. And for the first time, it's like my entire life snaps into focus. I can look at my life and I can see every single thing I did wrong. I can see how I purposefully chose my own unhappiness because the alternative was scary. Not bad, but scary. that road would have required work and effort. It would have meant happiness, but it would have been effort. And it was scary because I didn't quite know what that road would lead to. I knew what this road was. And sure, I was addicted to porn. And sure, I didn't want to get married and didn't want to meet a girlfriend because I'm overweight, obese, not in a position to even begin to say hello to a girl, right? If I were to go up to a random girl and say, "Sup, how you doing?" she would phone the police for harassment, right? So I'm not any of those things, but I've taken all of those things that I've done to myself and I've convinced me I don't want them in the first place. Why did I do that? Right? Of course I want to get married. Of course I want children. But why would I convince myself that I don't? Because the alternative means accepting the fact that I need to change. I need to go lose weight. I need to get healthy. I need to start taking care of my body. I need to start meeting people. That's scary. Would it make me happier? Yes. But it's scary. And so I just choose the one that's less scary. Sure, it's not happiness, but it's not scary. If you want to succeed in this life, you need two things. The first and most important, you need Christ. You need Christ. I can't, the best I can describe this and the best I can explain this to you, you were made for Christ. God made you for himself. That is why no matter what you do in this world, no matter how many sins you try to follow in order to fulfill you, you are an infinite cup trying to fill yourself with the finite. You will kill yourself before you ever feel satiated. Because there's only one thing that can fill you, and that's Jesus Christ. Right? So you need that. There's no other way. And then, do what's scary. If it scares you, that's probably a good thing. You should probably try that. Because you'll never know. You might fail, but you might succeed. How did you start your journey? Prayer or Bible reading? Richard, how are you doing, sir? My journey is a bit long, so I won't go into full detail, but I didn't come to faith first. My brother did. And I remember I was quite annoyed with him coming to faith because my thinking was he's one of the smartest and most intelligent people I've ever met, which at that time was quite the admission because I am naturally an incredibly arrogant person. It's something I have to guard against consistently. But I knew, right? I thought that I was smarter than most people, but I always knew my brother is smarter than me, right? He's definitely more intelligent than me. Also evidenced by the fact that he's doing his master's in physics. So clearly, quite a smart guy. And seeing him becoming a Christian, I was very annoyed. I thought to myself, you're too intelligent for this nonsense. Then listening to his conversations, listening to how he speaks about God, seeing the change in his own life. I originally wanted to learn so that I could prove to him that it's not real. So I started watching videos about the historical accuracy of the Bible. And video after video turns out it's quite accurate. So I started reading a lot about the holes. Is there any holes in the story? Turns out, no, quite accurate. There's a couple of things we know for a fact. We know that Jesus lived. We know that Jesus died. And we know that there are at least 12 people who are convinced that they saw him rise from the dead. We know that for a fact. Actually, it's about 17 people because we know that there are 5 women involved in this as well. So these things we know for a fact to be true, which means there's one extra question that we have to ask because it's the only thing we can't know. Did Jesus actually rise from the dead? And to that, my thinking goes a little bit like this. If the authors of the Bible simply wanted to invent a story, they could not have done a worse job of it, given the time period in which they write. So first, who are the first people made aware of Jesus' birth? Who are the first people made aware of the birth of Jesus Christ? Shepherds. At the time, according to Jewish custom, a shepherd had zero value as an eyewitness. Shepherds were considered impure. If you're going to write a story about this Messiah figure, why are you using shepherds? You can use literally anything else but a shepherd. Right? That is beyond stupid if you're just inventing a story here. But they're shepherds. It would be like me writing a story about a Messiah and telling you that there were a bunch of ANC members that saw the Messiah. All of you would be like, dude, come on. ANC members, really? What makes you think I'm going to listen to these guys? Right? There's no point. It would be a similar sort of one-to-one comparison here. Those are the people who apparently saw him. And then, more importantly, who are the first people that see Jesus' empty tomb? Five women. And they write it down. 5 women. Big problem. According to Jewish custom, at the time, a woman has no value as an eyewitness. Saying, oh, I know this happened because the woman saw it, would mean nothing to the ordinary Jew. A woman cannot testify. Therefore, if you're going to invent this story, why in the hell are you getting women to be the first to see him? I mean, it makes no sense. And before you think, well, this may have just been a bunch of progressive writers, we have the Gospel of Peter, which we know to be a forgery, right? Or at least a fake gospel, because Peter didn't write that gospel. But that gospel clearly knew that this was a big mistake. Because in that gospel, it tries to correct the woman being the first to see Jesus' empty tomb by saying, no, Peter and some of the other people were also there. Right? So clearly, this writer understood that this is a problem. The fact that the woman saw the empty tomb. So from the perspective of the story being invented, it just makes no sense. Those writers were Jews. They lived in Judea. They would have understood the customs of the time and they wouldn't have made mistakes like this. Right? It's just, these are too obvious mistakes for you to go, wow, it doesn't matter, right? This is just invented. And then you can point to the fact that these guys somehow not only decided to lie, but also decided to suffer greatly because of this lie that they knew was a lie. Why? Why would you be beaten and poor? Because none of these guys were rich, right? And that's the other question I always have. When we look at the religions that were invented, we can always see why it was invented. So you look at Islam, for example. You look at Mormonism, right? The why these religions were invented is quite clear when you look at the history of these inventions. someone is gaining something, right? In the form of Muhammad, Muhammad gains a lot of wealth and a lot of power. In fact, he becomes arguably the most powerful man in Arabia, right? Joseph Smith gains a lot of wealth and a lot of followers and a lot of power. So it sort of makes sense. But these 12 that lie about what Jesus is going through, what do they gain? They're not rich. In fact, most of them are dirt poor. They're not praised or worshipped by anyone. In fact, anyone who wants to worship them, who wants to praise them, are told that they are not worthy of that worship and praise, and that praise belongs to Jesus Christ alone. So they're not doing it for their own sakes. They get caught, thrown in jail, beaten to within an inch of their lives. And yet they don't recant this story. They don't turn around and say, oh, I was just lying. They just go, oh, well, we'll take this. It's fine. So what's the incentive? Because if you tell me someone's lying, people don't just lie for no reason. People lie to get something. So if you're rationally going to make the assertion that the apostles just lied, tell me what they lied for. Because unless you can find what they lied for, at some point you have to argue maybe they didn't lie. Maybe they were telling the truth. And if that's the case, then there's only one thing left to do. You have to believe. And that's where I was. That's what happened to me. Once I got to that point that I couldn't answer, why would they lie? I remember just praying and saying, well, Lord, I guess I believe. And then I started going to church, and I have an amazing church family, an amazing church. I'm singing in the choir tomorrow at my church. And then I have another, we have communion tomorrow at church, and I'm singing in the choir. And then tomorrow evening, I have communion with a group of other friends. And they're going to watch The Passion of the Christ. I've never spent Good Friday with these guys, but it's probably going to be interesting. And then Sunday I have choir again, and then Sunday afternoon I'm having barbecue with friends from the church. So yeah, it's been a good 2 years filled with meeting amazing people, amazing friends, just an amazing church experience. I would say, Rich, having a church is fundamental. Maximilian, thank you so much for the 200 rand donation, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for what you do and the truth you bring. May God bless you beyond your wildest dreams. Thank you so much, sir. And God does every single day. Every single day. The amount of blessings, and I'm not even talking about financial blessings, because that's by His grace, and whatever He gives me is so that I can spend it in the kingdom. So, I'm talking about the fact that I'm able to sit here and there's people listening, and I'm able to share, hopefully, the gospel and the good news. That to me is beyond anything that I could ever have imagined. So already I am blessed. But thank you. I truly appreciate that. And yes, I would say if you are a Christian, find a church. Do not for a second think that you can do it without a church. You can't. If you think you can do it without a church, you have to understand it's you alone. Like the amount of just strength that you get from your community, from your church. But find one where the people actually care, where the people are actually interested in fellowship, They're interested in being a family because we are family. This is the one thing about Christians all over the world. You might be American, you might be British, you might be European, German, whatever the hell you are. If you're Christian, you are family. Right? If you came up to me in the street and you had the thickest Brazilian accent on earth and you told me that you're a Christian, whatever you ask, I'll do. Right? Because you're my family. I'm called to be there for you and to serve you because we're family. You find that in your local church. You find that in the global church. It's super important. Kicklol, thank you so much for the $20, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, sir. You're far too kind. And happy Easter to you as well, sir. Going to church soon? Nice. Oh, yeah. In Australia, you guys are almost there. Almost there. Kick, enjoy the church, man. I hope it's really good. Bring the truth and explaining it to a layman like myself to understand the world and what is going on is an amazing blessing. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I can't take any praise for that. It's just the Lord has been absolutely wonderful. And oftentimes just the way that I'm explaining it to you guys, the way that I understand it and the way it makes sense to me, which I'm blessed by because I've always had this sort of thing where you can explain something to me and it makes sense to me, even though I wouldn't be able to do it necessarily, but it makes sense at least. So I'm quite quick at picking stuff up, which apparently is a skill because it allows me to be able to explain to people sort of very difficult concepts, which I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the ability that I can do that. Because trust me, the first time I started reading about geopolitics, I was mega confused. There were a number of times where I was reading the same pages over and over again, going, what the hell are they talking about? And then it just sort of snapped. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I think I get this now. And then sometimes I watch YouTube videos of people much smarter than me. And I listen to their explanations and I have to do the same thing. Like multiple times over, I have to go, wait, what? What is this guy saying? And then after about 5 or 6 times, I go, oh. So yeah, I prefer to just explain it in the way that I would be able to understand it. And hopefully everyone else can too. Cherie, thank you so much for the 100 Rand donation. I really appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Happy Easter to you as well. Thank you. You're far too kind. Distract my mind because I'm afraid of change. Battle of the flesh. So, Richless, I've been struggling with marijuana and it tends to keep me away from people because I'm embarrassed about it. Which is why are you embarrassed? Your sin might be marijuana. Every single person that you will ever meet at church has sins greater than you, the same as you, and less than yours. The church is not for healthy people. The church is not for healthy people. It's for the broken. It's for the sinners. That's why we're there. Right? If you think you're gonna stay away from church until you figure out this, or until church is how you're gonna figure it out. Because guess what? You are not strong enough to beat your sin. We can't beat our sin. Christ can. Your job, find him. The way you beat your sin is by reading your Bible, praying, and waiting. He's going to do it for you. You just need to seek him. Fill yourself with his word so that life may abound within you. And that's the church. You're going to get that at the church. You're going to get that in the Bible. You're going to get that from the fellow believers, the saints that is around you. Maximilian, thank you so much for joining the Republic, sir. Really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the membership. Also, recently became consistently church going again. I didn't feel the value in it for many years for many nihilistic reasons. It's impossible to stand alone forever. So true, Siege. Saint, I'm happy to know that you are going to church. So happy. I don't even know how to word this, but what if I struggle with God because he feels like an absent dad? And I know all the arguments, but I can't help but want something more present because it hurts to see all this evil and not being able to do anything about it. KB, let me start by saying if you want to have a more in-depth conversation than what I can than what I can give you here, you're welcome to DM me. I have currently a number of conversations going with people about topics like this. But the way I will answer you is this. He's not absent. He's waiting. Evil isn't how do I evil isn't the absence of God. It's the presence of humanity. We are wicked and corrupt and evil. There's no other way around this. That is what we are. Wherever we go, we bring suffering into the world. We have the capacity for goodness as well. Don't get me wrong. We have the capacity to do good things and to help people. But we also have an insane capacity for evil. Jesus never says that he comes to establish heaven on earth. That's not the point. We need this evil and suffering because it helps us grow. It is through this evil and suffering that God is able to show his light. How would you know the light if there is no darkness? And it sounds cliche, but that's true. In the darkness of the world, the church is the light. We're called to be the light of his kingdom. And so, yes, there's evil, and yes, there's suffering. But when you actually join a church, when you actually start to have communion with believers, there's you start to see the beauty of broken people fighting desperately to hold on to the only thing that makes sense, Christ. You see people that are willing to lay down their lives in order to help those that suffer, that's willing to go out of their way to be punished in order to help those that suffer. You find that with God, nowhere else. But he never promised us the good life here. That is a life that is to come, right? That is the world that is to come. Can I ask you this, KB? Do you think it would be better if God removed all evil and suffering from the world? Would that be better? Would that be a better thing for God to do? Because he promises that he will do that and it will happen eventually. But I can tell you right now that the fact that God isn't doing that is a mercy. It's not a punishment, it's mercy. If God were to show himself, to destroy evil, God would have to show himself in his fullness of glory on earth. I don't want to face God in my current flesh. Because if the Bible is to be believed, and I believe the Bible, that is hell. That's what hell is. It's the eternal judgment of a righteous God. So the fact that God has sort of kept his glory from this world is mercy. It's not punishment. But because of our own corruption, we can't be in God's glory because it would destroy us. I want to say no, but I still can't help wanting it. And that's the problem. And it's fine, KB. My God, the Father that I worship, is bigger than your doubt. He's bigger than your questions. And he's not afraid of that. But what we so often do as believers is when we have doubts, when there's things that bother us, we run away from God. How is he supposed to answer you when you're running away from him? Run to him. Go tell him what makes you angry. Go tell him, God, I don't like this. Why is this? Why is this? Why is this? Share your doubts, your fears, your anger. He can take it. He's strong enough. He can take it. But running away from him isn't the answer. You're not going to find the answers there either. Right? Ultimately, we tend to run away. At least I used to run away from this because of the love of my own sin. I would say things. I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm talking only about myself here, KB. But my biggest issues with God was always the fact that my sin was sin. Those were my biggest issues with God. I wanted my sins not to be sins. I loved my sin. And I wanted to engage with my sin. I wanted to do things that I'm not allowed to do, that I shouldn't be doing. But I wanted to do that. And then I would invent all of these different problems that I have with the Bible. But really, it mostly just came down to my sin. And again, I'm genuinely not saying that's you, that's me. But maybe my testimony can help someone, right? Lamborghini, thank you so much for becoming a loyal member of the Republic. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're far too kind. Yeah, justification, justifying our sins, finding ways to excuse our sin. Because ultimately, the heart is deceptive above all things. Have been lost. The children today cannot conduct a conversation permanently on mobile. Anita, yes and no. I mean, I think it can change. I think you see it. There are a number of young people who are starting to take it a lot more seriously, and it is changing. I believe so. I believe it is changing. Ulrich, how you doing, sir? And yes, it is our choice, but again, it would depend, right? Because there's definitely various different philosophies on this. RPS, I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Baptist. So I'm assuming for the point that you're trying to make, it doesn't really matter, right? But yeah, it would depend on the theology that you follow specifically, right? Because you're either going to fall on the Armenian side, right? you're going to fall on the Armenian side of things, and the Armenian side obviously believes in complete free choice, or you're going to fall on the Calvinist side, which doesn't believe that it's a free choice. I am more partial to the Calvinist view, so I would call myself a Calvinist, but I also fully understand that there are people who follow or believe in the Armenian position. And I respect that too, because again, it's my interpretation of the Bible versus people that are just as smart, if not smarter than me, and their interpretation of the Bible. And it's ultimately going to, one day, I hope we can ask God, right? Which one of us was right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So RBS, it's not a historical fact. Literally nothing that you said is actual fact. Because the Bible that I read doesn't date back to 325 AD. You're referring to the first Bible that was bound together by Constantine, but we now have much earlier remnants and scriptures that we can compare, right? In order to know what the original writers wrote and what they meant. And it lines up 100%. So your historical fact is historical invention because you don't want to believe it. And that's fine. You don't have to believe it. In fact, some will never believe, and they will be cast into the outer fires where there is a gnashing and a weeping of teeth. A weeping and a gnashing of teeth. I wish that you would not be that guy, but if that is you, then hey, that has to happen with most people. I wish you would stop being dishonest, though. Like, look, you don't have to believe in God, and you can just say, I don't believe in God, and that's fine. No one here is forcing you, friend. No one's forcing you to believe in God. You don't have to lie about it, and you definitely don't have to make a fool of yourself. Yeah, RPS, you don't even know what the word Bible means, which is clear from that statement. The word Bible means library. The first Bibles that you're referring to, that was by Constantine, was merely collecting all of the books of the Bible into a single biblios, library. The Bible, as you so idiotically claim, was never written. The books of the Bible was written by over 40 authors over 1600 years. And we have fragments as well as manuscripts of every single one of those books of the Bible. So, Bibles are books and scriptures banded together. Yep. But some people just don't. You see, the thing is, I don't mind. I don't mind agnostics, because to be agnostic is actually to be intellectually honest, right? Because at least if you're an agnostic, you are saying, I don't know if there is a God, but I don't believe in God. That's to be agnostic. To be atheist is, in my opinion, atheism is for the intellectually ignorant. Because the level of stupidity that one has to possess to make a certain claim that there is no God, even though you can't prove it. Because if you're making a claim, if you're saying there is no God, you have to be able to prove that there is no God. Because you just made a statement. You made a statement. You said that there is no God. You have to be able to prove that. If you can't prove that, then you're obviously wrong. And you're ignorant. And that's really the biggest issue for me with atheism. So whenever I meet atheists, I already know I'm dealing with someone of lesser intelligence. Like that I know for a fact. And I'm not just saying this to insult you. I'm listening to your arguments, and I'm genuinely astounded because I used to sound like you. I made the same arguments. And when I'm talking about intelligence, I'm not talking about intellectual capacity. Because you might actually have the capacity to be very intelligent, but your ideological belief has made you stupid. Because I'm listening to your arguments and I'm going, wait, you really believe that? All right. Is this what I used to sound like? Because, I always thought I sounded smart. I don't have to be able to prove my side, right? I at least have evidence for my side. You have no evidence, Austin. Not only do you not have proof, you have no evidence. I have evidence. Proof I don't have. I can't offer you proof, but I can offer you evidence. You have nothing on your side other than, I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe. End of discussion. No evidence. You physically have not a shred of evidence to suggest that there is no God. I at least have evidence that there is a God. So, on the balance of evidence, I still win. All you have is what? The universe is evidence of not having a creator? Like, Austin, what the hell are you talking about? The universe, according to you, is evidence that there is no creator. Then, okay, provide the scientific proof for how it all came to be. Since you seem to think that the universe provides the evidence that there is no creator. The best you can do is take me to the Big Bang, which I happen to believe in as well, just FYI. So you can take me to the Big Bang. Then the second I ask you, now I will run through a couple of scenarios here because I don't think you're intelligent enough to actually answer this, so I'll answer it on your behalf. I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to ask you, who created the matter that ultimately became the singularity that ultimately led to the Big Bang? You're going to do one of a couple of things. You're going to go the Richard Dawkins approach, and you're going to say, that's a stupid question. You can't ask that question because we can't know what happened before everything happened. No one could ever ask that question. So ultimately, all you said is, I don't have an answer to the question that you just asked. And if you even ask the question that you asked, it's a stupid question because I don't have an answer to that question. It's impossible for me to answer the question, what came before the Big Bang? Because I'm just telling you nothing was before the Big Bang. So nothing just combusted into everything, but I can't ask how nothing turned into everything, even though nothing ever turns into anything right now. Sounds like a miracle to me, but never mind, we'll leave it there. So you're going to go with the Richard Dawkins approach on this. Or you could go, actually, no, I'm not going to go for Richard Dawkins. I'm going to go for the multiverse theory. Oh, so we're just moving the answer one step further away. Giant machine somewhere in the clouds that just spits out galaxies. We don't know how that machine came to be to spit out the galaxy that it does, but it somehow does. And for some reason, this machine happens to have created a galaxy that is absolutely perfect to contain life. Now I'm going to ask you the next question. Where does this machine actually come from? Again, you're going to say, you can't ask me where a machine comes from that creates all galaxies because that's impossible to answer, because that would be like asking what came before nothing existed. Again, you've just moved the problem one step further. You have not actually provided any answer to the original problem. Where did it all come from? You could always follow the Penrose example, Roger Penrose, brilliant physicist, or actually mathematician. And then you could say, well, I'm going to invent in order to deal with the problem of where does everything actually come from, because it is a legitimate problem in science. All scientists, even the ones who say there is no God, all admit the one problem that they have is they can't prove where it all comes from. And even the question, where does it all come from, is a really uncomfortable question because there's all sorts of mathematical reasons why it is physically impossible for nothing to create everything. So then you could come up with what Roger Penrose effectively calls the phantom zone, right? And in this phantom zone, all sorts of calculations happen all the time. It spits out a new universe. The universe exists for a period of time, then it comes to nothing. It goes back into this universe, into this sort of phantom realm that then spits out a new universe outside of it. So you just invented a whole new realm in order to get away from God. No matter where you go on this, I am constantly going to trace you right back to the question, where did it all begin? And your answer is always going to be the same. Nothing somehow created everything. Now, if I held up these headphones and you asked me, hey, who made those headphones? And I told you, nothing, they just appeared. You would answer? Are you out of your mind, dude? That would be your answer. Because you can see that this thing was created. You can see the lines, you can see the straps, you can see how it all fits together. Something must have created this. There's no way that this thing just appeared. Now, if it is true for this headphone, how could you possibly argue that a universe infinitely more complex than these headphones, infinitely more complex, with rules so incredibly precise that if even one of those rules were off by a digit, none of this would exist? You believe that that was created by nothing, but you will not believe that this was created by nothing. Who's the idiot? Scripture actually says that when a possessed person interrupts a church gathering, that they should be taken outside and dealt with later. Delia, yeah, well, luckily this isn't a church gathering, right? I'm just a guy that happens to love God. I like talking about it. What I will say is I don't believe that any of the people currently in chat, not you guys, the normal guys, I'm talking about Austin and Pear Shaped and these guys, I don't think any of them are actually interested in having a conversation. I genuinely think it's mainly just disruption. That's basically all they're interested in. Because there are fundamental problems with the view, and then you get a response, who created God then? Which, the second you ask me that question, Austin, from a principled and philosophical position, you then have to accept. You can't ask me who created God without first accepting that there is a God, right? Because the problem is, if you will not accept that, if I answer you, you're immediately just going to go back to, well, God isn't real. So you're going to play sort of hide the bone with the argument. As soon as I answer you, you're just going to retreat back to your original position. So if you are willing to philosophically commit to the belief that God is real, just for the sake of this argument, I'm not asking you to suddenly start going to church, but for the sake of this argument, you have to first accept that God is real. And you can't then run back and go, well, no, God isn't real, because then you're being intellectually dishonest. But if you are willing to, at least for the sake of this argument, philosophically accept that God is real, then God does not need a creator. He is the creator. It is from him that all created things flow. So he does not need an origin. because he is the origin of all things. I'm just wondering how we got into this topic. What did you want to talk about originally? Delia, we were already done with all of the political topics, and I can't even remember how we got into this topic, but we walked into it. Joe Jafe, Bear Shape, this isn't an airport. You don't need to announce your departure. I promise you, none of us are missing you. So it's good. What I am going to do, though, because it seems like there's a lot of disruption, and it genuinely feels like the disruption is just meant to get a rise out of a bunch of people. So I am going to remove the people disrupting the chat. If you have a problem, if you really think that you want to have this conversation with me, you're welcome to DM me. But I'm not really going to allow you to just disrupt chat. It would have been one thing if you actually just had a question, but you're genuinely just trying to, you're making it so that other people can't chat, right? They physically can't get a word in because you're just spamming. Give him a call. Wait, what's happening? Name, how you doing, sir? No, I genuinely, so just to make this very clear, I don't mind freedom of speech and I don't mind people being able to say what they want to say. But I do require that you respect the other viewers in chat. Because what I saw here, literally for the last 5 minutes, was a group of individuals just spamming chat effectively, and oftentimes not even with anything trying to partake in the conversation, just trying to upset people, just trying to cause an argument. And at that point, I have no interest in defending that right for you. So fundamentally, I am just going to remove you on this. If you want to disagree with me, by all means, I'm happy to face your disagreements. I'm happy for you to attack me. You can DM me and tell me what a big asshole I am. I will never block you over that. Right? And we can have those conversations. But I need to also make sure that everyone else in the community feels like they can partake in the conversation and not have you ignorantly scream at them. Especially when you're so wrong about basic historical fact. If people study the Bible, then they won't have stupid questions. True. So some people were being disruptive. The biggest problem was there was about three, I don't, atheists, I guess is the best way to put them, that had no interest in actually being respectful about the conversation, just wanted to scream as much as they could. Which is fine, but they can go do that somewhere else. I'm sure there's other people that would be willing to entertain that. You can do whatever you want. It is ultimately up to you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to have to go. I have to still go buy food before the choir tonight. Final rehearsals before tomorrow. Do people feel good when they deny God? Don't know why you lumping me into spam. Joe, but I'm not lumping you into spam. I answered your question and then I responded to the other people. I didn't ban you, right? You're still talking. If you were spamming, I would have already banned you from the chat. Right? So my answer to you was, I don't know why people do it, but I can just go on how it made me feel. Right? Back in the day when I was an atheist, the dunking on religious people made me feel very intelligent. Like I always thought, oh, I'm owning these religious folk. Now that I'm on the other side of this and I listen to this, I genuinely just feel sorry. Right? I'm not looking at this guy thinking, wow, such an intelligent human being. I feel sorry for them because it's quite clear that from their perspective, they think that all Christians are the sort of the caricature that their apostles tell them they are. So you listen to people like Richard Dawkins, and when Richard Dawkins talks about Christians, they will make the claim that Christians are irrational, illogical, just sort of imbeciles, which is, of course, not true. Christians are highly intelligent. There are very many Christian scientists, people of great renown, people who have done incredible work in the sciences who are Christian, right? So clearly Christians aren't just dumb and stupid, but nevertheless, I think it makes atheists feel very proud and arrogant in a way to believe themselves to be the enlightened ones, right? Because that's what we used to think. When I was an atheist, I used to think I'm enlightened, right? I have this truth and this treasure that the Christians just miss. And I can tell you as a Christian now, you do not have that. The world that you have is a pretty sad one because you don't know your creator. You're a created being that has no connection to the very thing that gives you life. But you will only really learn to appreciate that when you go to your creator. And I understand how different it is, right? Or how difficult that is. Because if you don't believe in the creator, how the hell are you supposed to go to the creator? And maybe some of you all listening to this now and going, but I'm not a believer. How can I just believe? You can't say that. My advice, if you genuinely care, if you don't care, you're never going to get judgment from me, right? I'm not going to judge you because you're not a Christian. I wish that you will become a Christian, but I won't judge you for that, right? Everyone has to walk their own path in the way that they see fit. But I will give you just some advice if you care. Start reading your Bible. Start from Matthew, right? And just read the New Testament. Don't worry about the Old Testament now. It's a confusing book. You need to understand how to read the Bible in order to read the Old Testament. It's not that hard, but people sort of lose track because people seem to forget that there is such a thing as context. And so you have to understand the context of the Old Testament to really read the Old Testament. Start with the New Testament and don't read it because you believe it. Read it like you would any other scientific book or fact, with an open mind, exploring it. This is an important question. The question of is there or isn't there a God is the most important question you could ever find. Right? So read it with an open mind. And just say, God, if you are real, reveal yourself to me. Show me through the pages of this book whether you exist. And then start searching. And if you finish reading the New Testament and you still have no revelation and you still don't really feel any different, at least you've tried. Right? At least you've put in the effort. At least you were open-minded enough to look. But I guarantee you read it through once, you're going to want to read it again. And after your second time, you'll believe. And the reason it takes twice sometimes, not always. For me, I never even read the Bible when I came to faith. I started reading the Bible because I became a Christian. But the reason it takes twice or two times is usually stubbornness. You already kind of believe, but you don't want to admit it. And then by the second time, you sort of go, okay, fine. Yeah, fine. I believe, but it could take a bit of time. I need more. Like, where's your alt, my dude? Smite some shit. KB, he's waiting for you. Send me a DM. We'll talk. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am gonna go now. I have to go buy food, and then I have to get ready for the choir. Please have an amazing Easter weekend. If you are going away, please be safe on the roads. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy your family time. If you're going to church tomorrow, I wish you all the best. I hope you and your families are going to have a wonderful Good Friday, celebrating the death, but also the life of Jesus Christ that was bought for us with his blood. I appreciate each and every one of you. I pray that you are healthy and that you are happy and that, hey, get a couple of Easter eggs as well, because those are good. And, it's only once a year that you really get the good Easter egg. So have fun with that. And I will see all of you on Tuesday. And also, Targas, thank you so much for the $5 Did really appreciate you. Thank you. Can you sing Michigan Rag or Chicago Song Inspiration or Roy Orbison's song, Love So Beautiful, Electric Light Orchestra song, Big Wheels? I cannot. I don't know any of those songs. I genuinely don't know any of those songs, Tarkas. I do know a song that I've begged the choir lady, the choir leader, to allow us to sing that song. It's a Hebrew song, but they just gave it to us as like warm up. But it's probably my favorite song in the whole world. How does it go again? Oh yeah, it's Avenu Shalom 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 Aleichem. 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 Avenu Shalom Aleichem. Avenu Shalom Aleichem. Avenu Shalom Aleichem. Avenu Shalom Aleichem. And then it goes faster and 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 faster. And eventually it's just like, Avenu Shalom 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 Aleichem. It's crazy. But that's my favorite song. And if I'm lucky, we'll get to sing it on Sunday. If I'm lucky, we'll get to do that, because I don't know. I like the beat. It's just insane. I don't know what the words mean. Just FYI. No idea. But I do like the song. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I am gonna go now. Before I stay for another hour. We're already well over 3 hours here. So I can already hear the people complaining that this is too long for them to watch. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being part of the community, and for donating, hanging out, hitting the like button. Please hit that like button if you haven't already. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.